The wine glass shattered against his chest before Leora even realized what she'd done. The entire hall went silent, 200 wolves frozen mid-breath, their eyes locked on the crimson stain spreading across the stranger's black coat. She'd just assaulted someone at the Grand Council, someone important, judging by the collective gasp that rippled through the crowd. But when he looked at her, not with rage, but with something that made her blood run cold and hot all at once, she knew she'd made a terrible mistake. Or perhaps, after 10 years of hiding, she'd finally been found. If you want to see how a nameless servant becomes the most powerful queen in the northern frontier, stay until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. The northern frontier was not a place for the weak. It was a land where winter lasted 8 months, where wolf packs ruled with iron claws, and where survival meant knowing when to bow your head and when to bare your teeth. Leora Vance had learned early that she would do neither. She would simply disappear. For 10 years, she had been a ghost. No one at House Mordrin knew her real name. To them, she was just the girl, the one who scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled, who kept her eyes down and her mouth shut, who existed in the margins of their grand estate like a shadow they'd grown accustomed to ignoring. She preferred it that way. Invisibility was survival. Silence was safety. But tonight, that safety shattered along with the wine glass. The Grand Council gathering was the social event of the year, where the 5 great wolf clans of the northern frontier converged to discuss territory disputes, trade agreements, and political alliances. House Mordrin, where Leora served, was hosting this year, a fact that had sent the entire household into a frenzy of preparation for weeks. Leora had been ordered to serve drinks during the opening reception. Simple enough. Keep your head down, fill the glasses, fade into the background. She'd done it 100 times before. But she hadn't counted on him. She'd been weaving through the crowd with a tray of crystal glasses when someone stumbled backward, drunk and laughing, slamming into her shoulder. The tray tilted. Leora's hands shot out instinctively, trying to steady it, but momentum had already won. The glasses tumbled forward in what felt like slow motion, their contents arcing through the air in a ruby spray. And every single drop found its target. The man stood completely still as the wine soaked into his coat, his shirt, dripping from the sharp line of his jaw. He was tall, easily 6'4", with shoulders broad enough to block out the massive fireplace behind him. His hair was black as midnight, pushed back from a face that could have been carved from the mountain stone itself, all hard angles and unforgiving lines. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They were silver, not gray, not blue-tinged, but pure molten silver, like the moon reflecting off fresh snow. And they were staring directly at her. The entire hall had gone deathly quiet. 200 wolves, their conversations cut off mid-sentence, their glasses frozen halfway to their lips. Even the musicians in the corner had stopped playing. The only sound was the soft drip, drip, drip of wine hitting marble. Leora's throat closed. She recognized the weight of that silence. It was the same silence that had fallen the night her pack was slaughtered, the moment before everything exploded into violence and screaming. She started, her voice barely a whisper. You didn't mean to drench the Alpha King in front of the entire council? Someone drawled from her left. Well, that's comforting. Leora's head snapped toward the voice. A woman stood there, beautiful and poised in a gown of ice blue silk, her blonde hair swept up in an elaborate style that probably cost more than Leora earned in a year. Her smile was sharp as a blade. Alpha King. The words hit Leora like a physical blow. She looked back at the man, really looked this time, and saw what she'd missed in her panic. The way every wolf in the room had angled their bodies toward him, even in stillness. The invisible weight of power that pressed outward from him like heat from a forge. The absolute certainty in his posture that said he'd never once questioned his right to stand exactly where he was. Kyle Draven, the Alpha King of the Northern Frontier, the most powerful wolf in 5 territories, commander of the largest pack, enforcer of the council's laws, and she'd just thrown wine at him. Lord Mordrin, the blonde woman's voice cut through Leora's panic. I believe your servant just assaulted the Alpha King. Surely this warrants discipline. Lord Castor Mordrin pushed through the crowd, his face mottled red with rage and embarrassment. He was a thick-bodied man with graying hair and cold eyes that had never once looked at Leora with anything resembling kindness. In the 10 years she'd served in his household, he'd spoken to her perhaps a dozen times, and each word had dripped with contempt. "Your Majesty, I am profoundly sorry," Mordrin began, already reaching for Leora's arm. "Don't." The single word from Kael Draven stopped Mordrin cold. The Alpha King hadn't moved, hadn't even shifted his weight, but the command in that syllable was absolute. Kael's silver eyes were still locked on Leora. She felt pinned by that gaze, like a rabbit caught in an open field with a hawk circling overhead. Her wolf, the part of her she'd kept buried for a decade, stirred restlessly beneath her skin, confused by the pull she felt toward this stranger. "What's your name?" Kael asked quietly. The question was simple. The weight behind it was anything but. Leora's mind raced. Her real name had died with her pack. To speak it now, in front of all these wolves, would be suicide. But to lie to the Alpha King's face? "I don't have one," she whispered. "They just call me Girl." Something flickered across Kael's face. Too quick to name, but it made his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "That's because she's nobody," Mordrin interjected, his hand still hovering near Leora's arm, but not quite touching her after Kael's warning. "A stray we took in years ago out of charity. Your Majesty, please, allow me to remove her and administer appropriate punishment." "No." Again, that single word. But this time, Kael's eyes finally left Leora's face, sliding to Mordrin with the slow, deliberate movement of a predator selecting prey. "She stays. You may go." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mordrin's face went from red to white in an instant. Around them, Leora could feel the other wolves leaning in, their attention sharp with sudden interest. This was the kind of moment that would be dissected in whispers for months. "Your Majesty, She's my servant, I really must insist." "Are you questioning my authority, Mordrin?" The question was asked pleasantly, almost conversationally, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Mordrin took a step back, his hands rising in a gesture of submission. "Of course not, Your Majesty. Forgive me. I merely thought—" "You thought wrong." Kael's attention shifted back to Leora, and she felt her breath catch again. "Clean this up, bring me a new coat, and then we'll talk." It wasn't a request. Leora nodded mutely and fled, her feet carrying her toward the servants' passages on pure instinct. Behind her, the hall slowly came back to life, conversations resuming in hushed, excited tones, the musicians tentatively picking up their instruments. But Leora didn't hear any of it over the pounding of her heart. The servants' wing of House Mordrin was a different world from the grand halls and opulent chambers where the wolf nobility lived. Here, the walls were plain stone, the floors bare wood, the lighting dim and practical. Leora had spent 10 years learning every corner of this maze, every shortcut and hidden passage. She knew exactly where to find a clean coat in the Alpha King's size. The storage room smelled of cedar and mothballs. Leora's hand shook as she pulled a formal black coat from its hanger. Simple, elegant, expensive. She pressed it against her chest, trying to slow her breathing. What just happened? The logical part of her brain cataloged the disaster. She'd humiliated herself in front of the entire council, likely ensured she'd be fired, or worse, by Lord Mordrin, and caught the attention of the most dangerous wolf in the territories. But another part, the part she'd spent a decade trying to silence, was fixated on something else entirely. The way Kael Draven had looked at her, not with disgust at the wine-soaked mess, not with anger at her clumsiness, but with something that looked almost like recognition. Impossible. She'd never seen him before in her life. She was certain of it. A man like that wasn't someone you forgot. "There you are." Leora spun, her heart lurching into her throat. The blonde woman from the hall stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression somewhere between amused and calculating. "I'm sorry, my lady," Leora said quickly, lowering her eyes in the submissive posture she'd perfected. "I'm just retrieving—" "I know what you're doing." The woman stepped into the room, the door clicking shut behind her. "I'm Celine Thrace, and you, little servant, just made a very interesting evening significantly more interesting." Leora said nothing. Silence was always safer. Celine circled her slowly, like a cat examining a mouse it wasn't quite ready to kill. "Do you know who I am to the Alpha King?" No, my lady. I'm his fiancé. The word came out with just a hint of emphasis, as if Celine was testing how Leora would react. Or I will be, once the formal announcement is made at the end of the council. We've been promised to each other for quite some time. Leora kept her face carefully blank, though something uncomfortable twisted in her chest. Congratulations, my lady. Celine laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. You're a good liar. I can see why you've survived in Mordrin's household this long. He's not known for his kindness to servants. That was an understatement. Leora had the scars to prove it. But here's what I find fascinating, Celine continued, stopping directly in front of Leora. Cale Draven has never, and I mean never, shown interest in servants, or common wolves, or anyone beneath his station, really. He's practical to a fault, ruthless, even. Yet tonight, he orders one of the most powerful lords in the territory to back off. For you. It was an accident, Leora said quietly. The wine, I mean. I don't care about the wine. Celine's eyes, ice blue, calculating, narrowed. I care about the way he looked at you, like he was seeing a ghost. The word sent a chill down Leora's spine, but she forced herself to stay calm. I don't know what you mean, my lady. I'm nobody, just a servant. Celine studied her for another long moment, then smiled, a calculated expression that didn't reach her eyes. Well, I suppose we'll see, won't we? After all, you're expected back in the hall. The Alpha King is waiting for his coat. She swept past Leora, pausing at the door. A word of advice from one woman to another? Whatever game you think you're playing, you're out of your league. Cale Draven is not a man who forgives weakness. And if you think a pretty face and an accident will earn you any favors, Celine let the threat hang in the air, unfinished. Then she was gone. Leora stood alone in the storage room, clutching the coat, her mind racing. She wasn't playing any game. She'd spent 10 years actively trying to avoid notice, to be as unremarkable and forgettable as possible. But something had shifted tonight. Something had broken. And as much as she wanted to run, as every instinct screamed at her to grab her few possessions and disappear into the wilderness the way she had as a child, she knew it was too late. The Alpha King had seen her, and men like Cale Draven didn't forget Shumti. Dash it. When Leora returned to the hall, the reception had resumed its normal rhythm. Wolves clustered in small groups, discussing business and politics in low tones. Servants moved through the crowd with trays of food and drink. The musicians played a soft waltz in the background, but Leora felt every eye track her as she crossed the marble floor. Cale Draven stood exactly where she'd left him, though someone had cleaned up the wine and he'd removed his ruined coat. He wore only a white shirt now, the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and somehow that made him look even more dangerous, less civilized. He watched her approach with that same unnerving intensity, his silver eyes missing nothing. Your coat, Your Majesty, Leora said quietly, offering it with both hands, her gaze fixed on the floor. Look at me. It wasn't a request. Slowly, Leora raised her eyes. Up close, Kael was even more imposing. He radiated power in a way that made her wolf whimper and press close to her spine, torn between submission and something else. Something that felt dangerously like attraction. What's your name? He asked again. I told you, I don't. Your real name. The question hit like a physical blow. Leora's breath caught, her mind scrambling. How could he know? She'd been so careful. For 10 years, she'd been nothing but a nameless servant, a ghost in the background. I don't know what you mean, Your Majesty. Liar. The word was soft, almost gentle, but the certainty behind it was absolute. Cale took the coat from her hands, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. The contact sent a shock up Leora's arm, not painful, but electric, like touching a live wire. Her wolf surged beneath her skin, suddenly alert, suddenly interested in a way that terrified her. You felt that, Cale said. Not a question. A statement. Leora jerked her hand back, pressing it against her chest. I don't know what you're talking about. The bond. He said it like he was discussing the weather. Calm, matter of fact. You're my mate. The world tilted sideways. Leora heard the words, understood their meaning on an intellectual level, but they couldn't be true. They couldn't. Mate bonds were rare. So rare that most wolves lived their entire lives without finding theirs. And when they did occur, they happened between wolves of similar status, similar power. Not between an alpha king and a servant with no name, no pack, no past. "That's not possible," she whispered. And yet, Kael's expression hadn't changed, still calm, still certain, still watching her like she was a puzzle he was determined to solve. "I've been searching for you for 10 years, since the night the Vance pack was slaughtered." Everything stopped. The music, the conversations, her heartbeat. Everything froze in that single terrible moment of recognition. He knows. Somehow, impossibly, the Alpha King knew who she was, what she was. The secret she'd buried so deep she sometimes forgot it herself. Leora Vance, last surviving member of the Vance pack, daughter of Alpha Marcus Vance and his mate, Alara, sister to two brothers who'd died defending their home, the girl who'd hidden in a cellar while her entire family was slaughtered above her. "No," Leora breathed, taking a step back. Then another. "No, you're wrong. I'm nobody. You're Leora Vance." Kael's voice remained steady, but something in his eyes had shifted, softened, maybe. Or maybe she was imagining it through the panic clouding her vision. "And I've been looking for you since the night I arrived too late to save your pack." The words punched through her chest like a fist. Leora felt her careful control, 10 years of practiced invisibility, cracking like ice over a thawing river. "I have to go," she managed, her voice breaking on the last word. "Leora." She ran, not with any destination in mind, just away. Away from those silver eyes and their impossible knowledge. Away from the bond she could feel trying to snap into place between them, like a rope pulling taut. Away from the truth she'd spent a decade running from. Leora burst through a side door and into the cold night air, her lungs burning, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall. The estate grounds were dark, except for the light spilling from the windows, and she used that darkness like a shield, disappearing into the shadows between buildings. She'd gotten good at running, at hiding. But as she pressed her back against the cold stone wall of a storage shed, trying to catch her breath, trying to slow her racing heart, Leora realized something that made her stomach drop. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't want to run. And that terrified her more than anything else. Leora didn't return to the servants' quarters that night. Instead, she hid in the stables, curled up in an empty stall with her arms wrapped around her knees, trying to make sense of everything that had just exploded into her carefully controlled life. Mate. The word kept echoing in her head, impossible and undeniable all at once. She'd felt it. That electric shock when their skin touched, the way her wolf had surged with interest and recognition. Those were textbook signs of a mate bond beginning to form. But it couldn't be right. Fate wouldn't be that cruel to tie her to the most powerful wolf in the territories, to someone who could expose her, destroy the fragile safety she'd built. And yet Kael had said he'd been searching for her for 10 years. Why? The Vance pack had been small, prosperous, yes, with good land and strong alliances, but not particularly powerful in the grand scheme of territorial politics. When they'd been massacred, it had been brutal and swift. 37 wolves dead in a single night. No survivors except for one 12-year-old girl who'd hidden in a cellar like a coward while her family died above her. Leora had spent the last decade trying to forget that night. The screaming, the scent of blood so thick it had seeped through the floorboards, the way the sounds had slowly faded to silence, and then, worse, the footsteps of the killers searching room by room. She'd stayed hidden for 2 days, not daring to emerge even when her water ran out and her stomach cramped with hunger. Only when she was certain the killers were gone had she climbed out of that cellar into a world painted red. She'd run then too. A child alone in the wilderness with no pack, no family, no name worth claiming. Eventually she'd stumbled onto Lord Mordred's lands, half dead from exposure and starvation. He'd taken her in, not out of kindness, but because servants were useful, and he'd never bothered to ask questions about where she'd come from. For 10 years that had been enough. Safety through invisibility. But now the Alpha King knew. And worse, he claimed they were mates. Leora pressed her forehead against her knees, exhaustion finally dragging at her bones. Tomorrow she'd figure out what to do. Tomorrow she'd make a plan. Tonight she just needed to breathe. Thud. She woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Leora's eyes snapped open, her body instantly alert. Pale morning light filtered through the gaps in the stable walls. She'd fallen asleep in the stall, her back against the rough wood, her neck stiff from the awkward angle. The hoofbeats drew closer, then stopped. "I know you're in there." Kael's voice, calm and certain as it had been last night. Leora's heart kicked against her ribs. She stayed perfectly still, hardly breathing, hoping he was bluffing. "Leora, we need to talk." Hearing her name, her real name, spoken aloud after so many years of anonymity sent a shiver through her. Part fear, part something she didn't want to examine. Slowly, she stood, brushing straw from her servant's dress. Her hair had come loose from its braid, and she probably looked like she'd spent the night in a stable, which she had. When she emerged from the stall, Kael was standing just inside the stable doors, backlit by the morning sun. He'd changed from last night's formal wear into riding clothes. Dark pants, tall boots, a coat that emphasized his broad shoulders. He looked like he'd slept well and woken refreshed. Leora hated him a little for that. "You shouldn't have come here," she said quietly. "Someone might see." "Let them." Kael moved deeper into the stable, his footsteps soft on the packed dirt floor. "I'm the Alpha King. I don't need permission to speak with anyone." "The Alpha King doesn't usually seek out nameless servants in stables." "You're not nameless, and you're not a servant." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his eyes, far enough that she didn't feel completely trapped. "You're Leora Vance, daughter of Marcus and Alara Vance, last surviving member of a pack that was slaughtered 10 years ago. And you're my mate." Each word landed like a stone. Leora wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together the pieces of the identity she'd built. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why were you looking for me?" "Because I arrived at your pack's lands the morning after the massacre." Kael's expression didn't change, but something in his voice tightened. "I was there on council business. Your father had requested mediation for a border dispute. I found—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I found what was left. 37 bodies, but there should have been 38. So you spent 10 years searching for a missing corpse?" The bitterness in Leora's voice surprised even her. "I spent 10 years searching for the only survivor, the only witness to what happened that night." Kael took a step closer, and Leora forced herself not to back away. "Because whoever ordered that attack made it look like a random raid by rogues, but I knew better. That kind of coordinated violence doesn't happen without planning, without a reason." Leora's throat tightened. "And you think I know who did it? I think you might have seen something, heard something." His silver eyes searched her face, "even if you don't realize it yet." The memory rose unbidden, footsteps on the floor above her hiding place, a voice she'd recognized but couldn't place, giving orders to search every room. She'd pushed it down so deep, told herself it was trauma playing tricks on her memory. But now? "I was 12, Leora whispered. "I was hiding in a cellar. I didn't see anything." "But you heard something." It wasn't a question. Somehow, he already knew. Leora turned away, pressing her palms against the rough wood of a stall door. The horse inside whickered softly, sensing her distress. "Even if I did," she said carefully, "what difference would it make now? It's been 10 years. The killers are long gone. My pack is dead. There's no justice to be had." "There's always justice to be had." Kael's voice had hardened. "And the killers aren't as gone as you think." Something in his tone made Leora look back. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've spent 10 years investigating your pack's murder, gathering evidence, following trails. And I'm close, Leora, so close to proving who gave the order." He moved closer still, until she could feel the heat radiating from him despite the morning chill. "But I need you. I need what you remember." "I don't remember anything useful," Leora said desperately. "Just fear and blood and— Who do you serve?" The question cut through her spiraling thoughts. Leora blinked. "What?" "Right now, today. Who do you work for?" "Lord Mordrin, but I don't see what—" "Castor Mordrin." Kael said the name like he was tasting poison. "How did you end up in his household?" Leora's mind raced, trying to follow the shift in conversation. After the attack, I ran. I didn't know where to go. I wandered for days until I collapsed on his lands. His servants found me, brought me to the house. He gave me work. Out of the goodness of his heart? Kael's expression was unreadable. I don't know. I never questioned it. I was a child. I was grateful for food and shelter. And in 10 years, he never asked where you came from, never tried to find out who you were? Leora opened her mouth, then closed it. When she really thought about it, Lord Mordrin had been incurious. Deliberately so, maybe. He'd given her the hardest work, kept her isolated from the other servants, never allowed her anywhere near important guests or family matters. At the time, she'd thought he was just cruel. But what if it had been strategic? You think... Leora couldn't finish the sentence. The implication was too horrible. I think, Kael said quietly, that Castor Mordrin knows exactly who you are, and I think he's kept you close all these years for a reason. The stable seemed to tilt around her. Leora grabbed the stall door for balance, her mind frantically reshuffling every interaction she'd ever had with Lord Mordrin through this new, terrible lens. But why? She managed. If he was involved in killing my family, why would he keep me alive? Why risk insurance, maybe? A backup plan? Or... Kael's jaw tightened. Maybe he just wanted to watch you suffer. Some wolves are cruel that way. Leora felt bile rise in her throat. 10 years. She'd spent 10 years under the roof of the man who might have ordered her family's death, scrubbing his floors, serving his meals, making herself invisible while he... I'm going to be sick. She barely made it outside before her empty stomach tried to empty itself further. Kael followed, his hand hovering near her back, but not quite touching, as if he knew contact might be too much right now. When the heaving finally stopped, Leora slumped against the stable wall, trembling. I need proof, she heard Kael say. The council won't move against a Lord of Mordrin's standing without irrefutable evidence, and I'm close. I have financial records showing payments to known mercenaries around the time of the attack. I have testimony from pack members who saw suspicious activity on Vance lands in the days before, but I need the final piece. And you think I'm that piece? Leora's voice sounded hollow, even to her own ears. I think you might have heard something that night that you didn't realize was important. A name, a phrase, anything. Kael crouched down so they were at eye level. I know this is asking a lot. I know you've spent 10 years trying to forget. But Leora, your family deserves justice. The words hit like a punch, because he was right. Her parents, her brothers, her entire pack, they deserve more than to be forgotten victims of a massacre written off as a rogue attack. But the cost, if I help you, Leora said slowly, if I remember something useful, what happens to me? When Mordrin is exposed, when the council moves against him, where do I go? Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then, you'd be under my protection. As my mate, you'd have the full backing of my pack, my resources, my... I didn't agree to be your mate. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. But Leora needed to make this clear, needed to have something in her control when everything else was spinning into chaos. The bond is already forming, Kael said carefully. You felt it last night, same as I did. Fighting it will only... I don't care about the bond. Leora pushed herself upright, putting distance between them. I don't know you. I don't trust you. And I definitely don't want to be tied to someone just because fate or biology or whatever decided we should be. Something flickered across Kael's face. Hurt, maybe, though it was gone too quickly to be sure. He stood as well, his expression settling back into that unreadable mask of authority. Fair enough, he said quietly, but whether you accept the bond or not doesn't change the facts. Castor Mordrin likely killed your family. I can prove it. And together, we can make him pay. Leora closed her eyes, exhaustion and fear and something that might have been hope warring inside her chest. She'd spent 10 years running from her past, from her name, her identity, the girl who'd hidden while her family died. Maybe it was time to stop running. Okay, she whispered. I'll help you. When she opened her eyes, Kael was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, relief mixed with something deeper, more complex. Thank you, he said simply, and for the first time in a decade, Leora wondered if maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice by standing still. The decision to help Kyle felt like stepping off a cliff. For 3 days after their conversation in the stables, Leora moved through her duties in a fog of anxiety and anticipation, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the world to shift beneath her feet. It shifted on the 4th day. She was scrubbing the floor of Lord Mordred's study, a task she'd done 100 times before, when she heard voices approaching down the hallway. Male voices, low and tense. She recognized Lord Mordred's gravelly tone immediately, but the other voice made her freeze mid-scrub. Kyle. Absolutely unnecessary, Mordred was saying, his words clipped with barely controlled irritation. The council sessions are proceeding smoothly. There's no reason for you to extend your stay, Your Majesty. I disagree. Kale's voice was calm, almost pleasant. There are several territorial disputes that require more thorough examination, and I find the hospitality of House Mordred quite compelling. Leora's heart hammered. She needed to leave, to disappear before they entered the study. But the door was already opening, and there was nowhere to hide. Lord Mordred entered first, his expression sour. He stopped short when he saw Leora on her knees with a scrub brush in hand, his eyes narrowing. You, out! Leora scrambled to her feet, keeping her gaze down, but as she moved toward the door she felt it, that electric awareness that meant Kyle had entered the room behind Mordred. Every nerve in her body suddenly hummed with consciousness of his presence. Actually, Kyle said, she can stay. I prefer witnesses for important conversations. Mordred's face flushed red. Your Majesty, she's a servant, hardly appropriate for council business. And yet I insist. Kale moved past Mordred to the window, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Please continue your work. What was your name again? The question was directed at Leora. She met his gaze for just a moment and saw the subtle challenge there. He was testing something, pushing. They call me girl, Your Majesty, she said quietly. How unfortunate. Kale turned his attention back to Mordred. You were saying something about territorial disputes. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in political maneuvering. Mordred tried repeatedly to dismiss Leora, to move their discussion somewhere private, but Kyle deflected every attempt with smooth authority. And all the while, as Leora pretended to scrub floors she'd already cleaned, she listened, really listened. Mordred was nervous. She could hear it in the way his voice pitched slightly higher when Kyle pressed him on certain topics, the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot, the way he kept glancing at Leora as if her mere presence was a threat. The Vance territories, Kyle said casually, examining a map spread across Mordred's desk. They've been unclaimed for 10 years now. Seems like valuable land going to waste. Leora's hand stilled on the brush. Tragic business, that, Mordred muttered. But the land is cursed. Everyone knows it. No pack wants to settle where such violence occurred. Cursed. How superstitious. Kale traced a finger along the map's border. And yet I notice House Mordred's sheep graze remarkably close to the old Vance pastures. Almost as if you've been slowly absorbing their resources without formally claiming the territory. The land borders ours naturally. Sheep wander. Mordred's voice had gone tight. Surely the Alpha King isn't suggesting... I'm suggesting, Kyle interrupted smoothly, that someone has profited quite nicely from the Vance Pack's destruction, and I'm curious about who that someone might be. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Leora kept her eyes fixed on the floor, but her heart was racing. This was it. This was Kyle making his move. Your Majesty! Mordred's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. I've served the council faithfully for 30 years. My family has been loyal to the crown for generations. To imply that I had anything to do with... I'm not implying anything, yet. Kyle finally looked up from the map, his silver eyes cold as winter steel. I'm simply observing patterns, following evidence, doing my job as Alpha King. Evidence of what exactly? Murder. The word hung in the air like a blade. Leora's breath caught in her throat. Mordred went very still. The Vance massacre was investigated 10 years ago. It was ruled a rogue attack, random violence. Investigations can be flawed, especially when the investigators have reason to overlook certain inconvenient facts. Kale moved away from the desk, his hands clasped behind his back. Did you know that 3 days before the Vance pack was slaughtered, a significant sum of money was withdrawn from your accounts? Paid to parties unknown. I conduct business transactions daily. That proves nothing. True, but combined with testimony from witnesses who saw mercenaries on Vance lands in the days before the attack, combined with the fact that you conveniently absorbed much of their territory afterward, combined with, "Get out!" Mordrin's voice cracked like a whip. He was shaking now, his face mottled with rage and something that looked like fear. "This is my house, my territory, and I will not stand here and be accused by some boy king who thinks 10 years on the throne makes him—" "Careful." Kale's voice had gone soft, deadly. "You're speaking to your Alpha King. I'd choose your next words very carefully if I were you." The two men stared at each other across the study, the air crackling with tension. Leora felt her wolf pressing close to the surface, agitated by the conflict, by the predatory energy radiating from both males. Finally, Mordrin looked away. "My apologies, Your Majesty. The stress of hosting the council has made me short-tempered, but I maintain my innocence. I had nothing to do with the Vance tragedy." "Then you won't mind if I continue my investigation?" It wasn't a question. Mordrin's jaw worked, but he nodded stiffly. "Of course not. I have nothing to hide." "Excellent." Kale moved toward the door, pausing next to where Leora still knelt with her forgotten scrub brush. "Oh, and Mordrin? I'll be requiring additional staff during my extended stay. I'd like this one reassigned to my personal service." Leora's head snapped up. Lord Mordrin's face went from red to purple. "Your Majesty, surely one of the more experienced servants would be more appropriate. I prefer her." Kael's tone left no room for argument. "Have her things moved to the guest wing by evening." Then he was gone, leaving Leora and Mordrin alone in the study. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. 4. Then Mordrin moved, faster than Leora had ever seen him move, crossing the room in 2 strides and grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. He hauled her to her feet, his face inches from hers, his breath hot and sour. "What did you tell him?" he hissed. "Nothing. I swear, I didn't—" "Don't lie to me, girl." His grip tightened, and Leora bit back a cry of pain. "You've been here 10 years, and suddenly the Alpha King takes an interest in you? Suddenly he's investigating the Vance massacre and demanding you as his personal servant? What did you tell him?" "I didn't tell him anything." Leora's voice came out stronger than she felt. "I don't know why he wants me reassigned. Maybe he just—" "Shut up." Mordrin shook her hard enough to rattle her teeth. "I should have killed you 10 years ago, should have finished the job properly, instead of keeping you around like a God's damned pet." The words punched through Leora's chest. There it was, confirmation from his own mouth. "You did it," she whispered. "You ordered the attack. You killed them." Mordrin's eyes went wide, and for a moment she thought he might actually strike her. Then he released her arm abruptly, shoving her backward. "Prove it," he said coldly. "Let the Boy King investigate all he wants. He'll find nothing that can stand up in council court. I've been too careful." "But you just admitted. Your word against mine, girl. And who do you think the council will believe? A lord with 30 years of loyal service, or a nameless servant with delusions of grandeur?" He straightened his coat, his composure returning like a mask sliding into place. "Pack your things, report to the guest wing. And remember, one wrong move, one whispered word out of turn, and I'll make sure you disappear just like your family did." He left her standing in the study, trembling with rage and fear, and something that felt dangerously like triumph. Because now she knew, without doubt, without question, and knowledge, she was beginning to realize, could be its own kind of power. The guest wing of House Mordrin was a different world. Where the servants' quarters were cramped and utilitarian, this section of the estate was all soaring ceilings and expensive artwork, thick carpets that swallowed sound and furniture that probably cost more than Leora had earned in her entire life. She felt wildly out of place as she carried her single cloth bag down the hallway, directed by a tight-lipped senior servant to a room near the Alpha King's suite. "You're to attend His Majesty directly," the woman said, her tone suggesting exactly what she thought of this arrangement. "Any needs he has, you fulfill. Any questions he asks, you answer. Is that clear?" "Yes, ma'am." "And girl, Don't embarrass this household. The Alpha King may have questionable taste in servants, but you'll conduct yourself with dignity or you'll answer to me personally. The door to Leora's new room, it was actually a room, not just a cot in a shared dormitory, closed with a soft click. She stood in the center of it, clutching her bag, hardly able to process the change. A real bed with clean sheets, a window overlooking the gardens, a small writing desk and a washstand with a mirror above it. It was more luxury than she'd experienced since she was 12 years old. Leora set her bag down and moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The afternoon sun was beginning to slant toward evening, painting the gardens in shades of amber and gold. From here she could see wolves walking the paths below, members of the various packs attending the council gathering. How many of them knew what Mordrin had done? How many had suspected and said nothing? Settling in? Leora spun. Kale stood in her doorway. When had she failed to hear it open? Looking relaxed in casual clothes that somehow made him seem more dangerous, not less. Your Majesty. She dropped into a curtsy, but he waved it away. We're past that. Close the door. She did, her heart suddenly pounding. They were alone. Truly alone. Not in a stable or a public study, but in a private room with a bed, and relax, Kael said, reading her tension. I'm not here for that. We need to talk about what happens next. Leora forced herself to breathe normally. He admitted it. Just now, in the study, after you left. Mordrin said he should have killed me 10 years ago, should have finished the job properly. Kael's expression went very still. He said that exactly. Yes, and he said you wouldn't find any evidence that would stand up in council court, that he's been too careful. Arrogant bastard. Kael moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. But he's not wrong. I have circumstantial evidence, financial records, witness testimony, territorial patterns. But the council requires absolute proof for a murder charge against a sitting lord. I need either a confession in front of witnesses or the testimony of the survivor. Leora's voice sounded hollow. Me. You'd have to testify about what you heard that night, what you remember. And Mordrin's lawyers will tear you apart on the stand. They'll question your memory, your motives, your credibility. Kael turned to face her. They'll make you relive the worst night of your life in front of hundreds of wolves, and they'll do everything in their power to paint you as a liar. Leora wrapped her arms around herself. But it would be enough? My testimony? Combined with what I already have? Yes. It would be enough to force a formal investigation, to strip away Mordrin's protections and dig deeper. He paused. But Leora, you need to understand what you'd be facing. The council court is brutal, and Mordrin has allies who won't go down without a fight. I don't care. The words came out fierce, surprising even her. He killed my family. He kept me in his house for 10 years like some kind of trophy, and he threatened me today, said he'd make me disappear if I spoke out. She met Kael's silver eyes steadily. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. Something that looked like pride flickered across Kael's face. You're braver than you know. I'm not brave. I'm angry. Good. Use that. He moved closer, and Leora felt that electric pull again, the bond trying to snap into place between them. But we need to be smart about this. Mordrin's dangerous now that he knows we're investigating. He's already threatened you once. He might. A knock at the door interrupted him. Both of them froze. Your Majesty? A male voice from the hallway. Lord Mordrin requests your presence at dinner. He's gathered the council leaders to discuss tomorrow's session. Kael's jaw tightened, but his voice came out smooth and controlled. Tell him I'll be down shortly. Footsteps retreated. Kael looked back at Leora. This is his move. He's going to try to undermine me in front of the other lords, make me look like I'm overstepping my authority. He headed for the door, then paused. Stay in this wing tonight. Don't go back to the servants' quarters. Don't go anywhere alone. Understood? You think he'd actually try to hurt me? Here, with you in the house? I think Mordrin is a man with everything to lose, which makes him unpredictable. Kael's expression had gone hard. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. He nodded once and left, the door closing softly behind him. Leora stood in the sudden silence of her room, her mind racing. Everything was accelerating now, spinning faster toward some inevitable collision. She could feel it building like a storm on the horizon. And for the first time in 10 years, instead of running from the storm, she was walking straight into it. Dinner was a nightmare dressed up as a formal meal. Leora hadn't been invited, servants never were, but she could hear it. The guest wing shared a wall with the main dining hall, and voices carried through the expensive woodwork. She pressed her ear to the wall, hardly breathing, listening to Mordrin's carefully constructed performance. "Simply concerned about the precedent, Your Majesty," Mordrin was saying, his tone perfectly pitched to sound reasonable and concerned rather than confrontational. If the Alpha King can reopen investigations into settled cases based purely on suspicion, what stops any lord from being subject to the same treatment? Justice stops nothing? Kael's voice was cooler, more formal than when he spoke to Leora alone. And cases are only settled when the truth has been uncovered. But surely you agree that the council court requires evidence, not just feelings. Nervous laughter from some of the other lords. Leora's hands curled into fists. "I have evidence," Kael said flatly, "which I'll present to the full council when appropriate." Evidence of what exactly? This voice was new, female, sharp with intelligence. Celine Thrace, Leora realized, Kael's supposed fiancée. Lord Mordrin raises a fair point. What exactly are you accusing him of? A pause. Leora could almost feel the weight of every wolf in that room leaning forward, waiting. "I'm investigating the massacre of the Vance Pack 10 years ago," Kael said finally. "New information has come to light suggesting it wasn't a random rogue attack as originally believed." The reaction was immediate, a rush of voices, questions overlapping. "The Vance Pack? That's ancient history. What new information?" "Surely you're not suggesting one of us. Gentlemen, ladies." Mordrin's voice cut through the chaos, oily with false concern. "I think what His Majesty is trying to say is that he's committed to thoroughness, even in cases where the original investigation was perfectly adequate. It's admirable, really, if perhaps a bit obsessive." The insult was delicate, wrapped in courtesy, but Leora heard several wolves chuckle in agreement. "The original investigation was compromised," Kael said, his tone hardening. "The wolf in charge of it had financial ties to parties who benefited from the Vance Pack's destruction." Silence. "That's a serious accusation." Selena's voice had lost its mocking edge. "Do you have proof?" "I have documentation, bank records, witness statements." A pause. "And I have the survivor." Leora's heart stopped. The dining hall erupted. Wolves shouting over each other, demanding answers. But Mordrin's voice rose above them all, sharp with what sounded like genuine shock. "Survivor? There were no survivors. Everyone knows that." "Everyone was wrong." Kael's words fell like stones into water, rippling outward. "There was a witness to that night, someone who heard the attack, who can identify voices and confirm the premeditated nature of the violence." "Then where have they been for 10 years?" Celine demanded. "Why come forward now?" "Because they were hiding, in fear for their life, under the protection, or perhaps control, of the very wolves responsible for their family's death." Leora pressed harder against the wall, her pulse thundering in her ears. "You're bluffing," Mordrin said flatly. "There's no survivor. You're making this up to justify your witch hunt." "Am I? Then you won't mind when I present them to the council tomorrow." The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. "Your Majesty," Celine said carefully, "presenting a witness without proper vetting, without allowing the accused to prepare a defense, that's highly irregular. The council won't accept testimony under such conditions." "The council will accept what I tell them to accept." Kael's voice had gone cold. "I'm the Alpha King, and I'm invoking my authority to reopen this investigation and present new evidence. If any lord has a problem with that, they're welcome to challenge my ruling." No one spoke, because challenging the Alpha King's ruling meant challenging him directly, and that meant a dominance fight that could end in death. "Tomorrow morning," Kael continued, "full council session. I'll present my evidence and my witness, and then we'll see exactly how settled this case really is." The scrape of a chair being pushed back, footsteps. Where are you going? Mordrin called out, his carefully controlled tone finally cracking. I've lost my appetite. Kale's voice was already distant. Enjoy your dinner, gentlemen. Tomorrow should be enlightening. Leora heard the dining hall door slam. Then chaos as every wolf in the room started talking at once, questions and accusations flying. She stumbled away from the wall, her legs suddenly weak. Tomorrow. Kale was going to reveal her tomorrow in front of the entire council. She should have felt afraid, should have wanted to run. Instead, what she felt was something dark and fierce and burning. Let them see me. Let them all see what Mordrin did. A soft knock on her door made her jump. She opened it to find Kyle standing there, his expression unreadable. You heard, he said. Not a question. Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ambush you with the timeline, but Mordrin was pushing and I needed to… It's fine, Leora cut him off. I meant what I said earlier. I'm ready. Kyle searched her face. You understand what this means? Once I reveal you, there's no going back. You'll be stepping into the middle of a political firestorm. Good. Leora's voice came out steady. I've been in the shadows long enough. It's time these wolves remembered that the Vance Pack existed, that we were real, that we mattered. Something shifted in Kyle's expression. Respect, maybe, mixed with that same barely controlled intensity she'd seen in the stable. You're remarkable, he said quietly. You know that? The words did something strange to her chest. Leora looked away, suddenly flustered. I'm just tired of being afraid. No. Kyle stepped closer, and she could feel the heat of him, the pull of the bond thrumming between them. You're brave. There's a difference. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch sent electricity skittering across her skin. I won't let him hurt you, Kyle said. Tomorrow, when you testify, I'll be right there. And if Mordrin or anyone else tries to threaten you, I can handle myself. I know you can. His hand lingered near her cheek. But you don't have to handle it alone anymore. Leora met his silver eyes, and for a moment she let herself really look at him, see past the authority and the title to the man underneath. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe late 20s, only a handful of years older than her. And there was something in his face, a shadow of old pain that she recognized. Why? She asked quietly. Why does this matter so much to you? My pack, the investigation. Why spend 10 years on this? Kale's hand dropped. He turned away, moving to the window. Because I was too late, he said finally. When I arrived at your pack's lands that morning and saw what had been done. I've seen violence before. War, battle. But that was different. That was personal, cruel. He looked back at her. Someone wiped out an entire pack down to the children and thought they'd get away with it. And for 10 years they did. But it's more than that, Leora pressed. Isn't it? A long silence. Then, my father was murdered when I was 17, made to look like a hunting accident. But I knew better. Someone on the council wanted him dead, wanted to destabilize our pack. His jaw tightened. I spent 3 years gathering proof. And when I finally had it, when I was ready to bring the murderer to justice, he died. Heart failure, they said. Natural causes. Convenient. Too convenient. Kael's hands clenched at his sides. He died before he could be tried, before I could make him admit what he'd done, before my father's death could be avenged. He met her eyes. I won't let that happen again. Not with your family. Not with you. The vulnerability in his voice did something to Leora's carefully constructed walls. She'd spent so long seeing Kyle as just the Alpha King, a title, a position, a means to justice. But he was also just a man, one who understood loss and rage and the desperate need to make things right. Thank you, she said softly, for not giving up, for still looking when everyone else had forgotten. I could never forget. Kale moved closer again. Even before I knew about the bond, before I'd ever seen your face, I couldn't let it go. Something kept pulling me back to this case. Fate? Leora's voice was barely a whisper. Maybe. He was close enough now that she could see the silver flecks in his eyes, could feel her wolf rising to meet his. Or maybe I just knew, somehow, that you were out there, waiting. The bond pulsed between them, warm and insistent. Leora felt herself swaying toward him, drawn by something deeper than logic or choice. Then footsteps in the hallway shattered the moment. Cale stepped back immediately, his expression shifting back to cool professionalism. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. He was gone before Leora could respond, leaving her alone with her racing heart and the echo of warmth where they'd almost touched. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the bond humming beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. Tomorrow she would stand in front of the council and reveal herself. Tomorrow she would look Castor Mordrin in the eye and make him answer for what he'd done. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of her room, Leora allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She woke to screaming. Leora bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. For a moment she was 12 again, hiding in the cellar while her family died above her. Then she smelled smoke. The hallway outside her room was chaos. Servants running with buckets of water, wolves shouting orders, the acrid stench of burning wood thick in the air. Leora grabbed a shawl and rushed out, trying to make sense of the panic. What's happening? She grabbed a passing servant, a young man she vaguely recognized from the kitchens. Fire in the east wing, he gasped. Started in Lord Mordrin's study. It's spreading fast. He was gone before she could ask more, swept up in the rush of bodies trying to contain the blaze. Leora's mind raced. Mordrin's study, where all his papers were kept. His records, his documents, his evidence. She started running, not toward the exits like everyone else, but deeper into the house, toward the east wing. Heat hit her like a wall as she rounded the corner. The entire hallway was engulfed in flames, the expensive wallpaper peeling and blackening, the portraits of Mordrin's ancestors curling in on themselves. Leora! Cale appeared through the smoke, his face smudged with ash, his shirt torn. He grabbed her shoulders hard enough to hurt. What are you doing? You need to get out. The study, she gasped. All your evidence, the financial records, already gone. Cale's expression was grim. I tried to get in, but the flames were too intense. Someone set this fire deliberately, Leora. They made sure it started right where my investigation materials were stored. The implication hit like a fist. Mordrin. Probably, or one of his allies. Cale started pulling her back toward safety. But right now we need to... An explosion rocked the hallway. Leora felt herself thrown backward, Kael's arms wrapping around her as they hit the floor hard. Her ears rang, her vision swimming with spots. When she could see again, the hallway was completely blocked by fallen timber and flames. They were cut off from the main exit. This way! Cale hauled her to her feet, pulling her in the opposite direction. They ran through corridors filling with smoke, Kael seeming to navigate by instinct. Behind them, Leora could hear the fire spreading, consuming the east wing with terrifying speed. They burst into a small side room, a servant's passage, barely wider than Leora's shoulders. Kael pushed her toward it. There's a door at the end that leads to the gardens. Go, now. What about you? I need to make sure everyone else got out. I'll be right behind you. No. Leora grabbed his arm. You're not leaving me. Not after everything you said about being there for me. Cale looked like he wanted to argue, but another ominous crack from above ended the debate. They plunged into the narrow passage together, Kael's hand locked around Leora's wrist, pulling her forward through the darkness. The passage seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning, the smoke following them like a living thing. Leora's lungs burned. Her eyes watered. Just when she thought she couldn't go another step, she saw it, a sliver of moonlight ahead. They stumbled out into the night gardens, gasping for clean air. Behind them, the east wing of House Mordrin was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers. Wolves were everywhere, servants and nobles alike, all standing in small clusters, watching the destruction with stunned faces. And there, at the center of it all, stood Castor Mordrin. He was covered in soot, his face a mask of shock and grief as he watched his ancestral home burn. But when his eyes found Leora and Kael emerging from the servants' passage, something flickered across his expression, something that looked almost like satisfaction. Thank the gods you're both safe, Mordrin called out, his voice carrying across the garden. When I couldn't find you in the chaos, I feared the worst. Kael's hand tightened on Leora's wrist. She could feel his anger radiating like heat. Funny, Kale said coldly. The fire started in your study, right where I'd stored my investigation materials. Almost like someone knew exactly what to burn. The other wolves in the garden went very quiet, their attention snapping between the Alpha King and their host. Mordrin spread his hands in a gesture of helpless confusion. Your Majesty, surely you're not suggesting I would destroy my own home, my family's legacy. I'm suggesting, Kyle said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, that a man facing murder charges might be willing to sacrifice quite a lot to destroy evidence. What evidence? Celine Thrace stepped forward from the crowd, her ice-blue eyes sharp. If you had solid proof, Kyle, you would have presented it already. This whole investigation has been built on suspicion and circumstance, and now your supposed evidence has conveniently been destroyed. She looked at Mordrin with sympathy. Perhaps the Alpha King started the fire himself when he realized his case was too weak to stand. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Accusing the Alpha King of arson was bold even for Celine. That's absurd, Kale started, but Celine talked over him. Is it? You've been obsessed with the Vance Pack for 10 years, obsessed with finding a survivor who may not even exist. Her gaze flickered to Leora with cool assessment. And now suddenly you claim to have a witness? A servant girl from Mordrin's own household? How convenient. How perfectly timed to disrupt the council and undermine one of its most loyal lords. Murmurs of agreement. Leora felt the crowd's sympathy shifting, turning away from Kael's accusations and toward Mordrin's apparent victimhood. I do have a witness, Kael said firmly, and she will testify tomorrow as planned. Will she? Mordrin's voice was gentle, almost pitying. Your Majesty, with all due respect, you can't seriously expect the council to accept testimony from a traumatized servant who's clearly been influenced by your interest in her. The implication was clear, dirty, and from the way several wolves nodded in agreement, it was working. Leora felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. She'd spent 10 years being invisible, being dismissed, being treated like she didn't matter. And now they were doing it again, looking right through her as if her truth, her pain, her family's deaths were nothing more than political theater. I'm Leora Vance. The words came out before she could stop them. Loud, clear, undeniable. Every eye in the garden snapped to her. I'm Leora Vance, she repeated, her voice growing stronger. Daughter of Marcus and Alara Vance. Last surviving member of a pack that was slaughtered 10 years ago. And I've been hiding in this monster's house ever since. She stepped forward, pulling free of Kael's grip, walking toward Mordrin with steady purpose. I heard you that night, she said, and her voice didn't shake. I was hiding in the cellar, and I heard your voice giving orders. I heard you tell the mercenaries to make it look random, to leave no survivors. Mordrin's face had gone ashen. You're lying. You're a disturbed girl with a fantasy. And for 10 years you kept me here. Leora continued, her words cutting through his denials. Watched me scrub your floors, serve your meals, kept me close like a trophy, like proof of what you'd gotten away with. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. But you didn't get away with it, because I survived, and I remember. Silence. Then Celine laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. This is ridiculous. The traumatized fantasies of a servant girl are not evidence. The council will never eat. The council will hear her testimony, Kael said, his voice like iron. Tomorrow, as planned, and then we'll let justice decide. Mordrin's face twisted with fury and fear. For a moment, Leora thought he might actually attack her right there in front of everyone. But then his expression smoothed back into false concern. Of course, Your Majesty. Let the poor girl speak. But when her accusations fall apart under scrutiny, I expect a full apology from the crown. He turned and walked away, his remaining servants scurrying after him. The crowd began to disperse, wolves murmuring to each other, casting looks back at Leora and Kael, some curious, some sympathetic, some clearly unconvinced. When they were finally alone in the garden, with the fire still burning behind them and ash falling like snow, Kael turned to Leora. You didn't have to do that. Reveal yourself before tomorrow. Yes, I did. Leora watched the flames consume the east wing, because he tried to silence me again, tried to make me disappear back into the shadows. She looked at Kael. I'm done hiding. Whatever happens tomorrow, at least now they know my name." Kael's expression was unreadable. Then, slowly he reached out and took her hand. "Leora Vance," he said quietly, "it suits you." And standing there in the garden with her family's murderer somewhere in the darkness and the council's judgment waiting with the dawn, Leora felt something settle in her chest. She wasn't a nameless servant anymore. Wasn't a ghost or a victim or a girl too scared to speak. She was Leora Vance, and tomorrow she would make them all remember what that meant. The dawn came cold and unforgiving, turning the smoke-stained sky the color of old bruises. Leora hadn't slept. She'd spent the night in a borrowed room in the western wing, the only part of the estate the fire hadn't touched, watching ash fall past her window like toxic snow. Her mind kept replaying the moment she'd spoken her name aloud. The shock on Mordrin's face, the weight of dozens of eyes suddenly seeing her for the first time in 10 years. There was no taking it back now. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. She opened the door to find a servant girl, young, nervous, holding a bundle of clothes. "His Majesty sent these," the girl said, barely making eye contact. "Said you'd need something appropriate for the council session." Leora took the bundle. Inside was a dress of deep forest green, simple but well made, with none of the elaborate decoration the noble ladies favored. It was the kind of dress a woman of standing might wear. Not a servant's plain cotton, not a lady's silk and jewels, but something in between. A statement, she realized. Kael was dressing her as what she was. The last of a pack, a survivor, someone with the right to stand before the council as more than just a witness. She bathed quickly in the wash basin, scrubbing away the smoke and ash, then dressed with hands that only shook a little. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The servant's invisible armor was gone. In its place was someone who looked almost whole. Another knock. This time it was Kael himself, dressed formally in black and silver, his expression unreadable. "Ready?" he asked. "No," Leora admitted, "but I don't think that matters anymore." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. "Who told you that?" "My father, right before he rode out on what turned out to be his last hunt." Kael's jaw tightened briefly, then relaxed. "Come on, the council's already gathering." The council hall was in the main house, the only building large enough to hold what had become the northern frontier's most important political event in a decade. As they walked through the corridors, Leora could feel the weight of history pressing down. Every wolf they passed stopped to stare, whispers following in their wake like a physical presence. The girl, the survivor, the one who's accusing Lord Mordrin. At the massive oak doors to the hall, Kael paused. "Once we go in there, everything changes. You understand that?" "I've been understanding that since the moment I threw wine at you," Leora said. Then quieter. "I'm ready." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. The door swung open. The council hall was a testament to old power. Vaulted ceilings carved with the symbols of the 5 great clans, massive windows letting in the cold morning light, a raised platform at the far end where the Alpha King's throne sat. But it was the wolves filling the space that made Leora's breath catch. Hundreds of them. Every lord and lady of standing in the northern territories, their advisors and seconds, witnesses and interested parties, all of them turning as one to watch her enter beside Kael. The whispers rose like a wave. Lord Mordrin sat in the section reserved for the accused, flanked by lawyers in formal robes. His face was a careful mask of wounded dignity, but his eyes tracked Leora with predatory focus. Beside him, Celine Thrace sat with perfect posture, her ice blue gown making her look like winter incarnate. Kael led Leora to a seat near the front, then ascended the platform to his throne. When he sat, the hall fell silent with a respect born from both tradition and fear. "This council session is called to order," Kael's voice carried through the space with natural authority. "We are here to address accusations of murder, conspiracy, and crimes against pack law. Lord Castor Mordrin stands accused of ordering the massacre of the Vance pack 10 years ago. The Crown presents evidence and witness testimony to support these charges." Mordrin's lead lawyer, a silver-haired wolf with sharp features, stood smoothly. "Your Majesty, the defense objects to these proceedings on multiple grounds. First, the supposed evidence was conveniently destroyed in last night's fire, which started in Lord Mordred's own study, Kyle interrupted coldly. A fact the council should note. A tragic accident that destroyed Lord Mordred's ancestral home, the lawyer countered. To suggest arson without proof is baseless speculation. Furthermore, the only witness the Crown intends to present is a servant girl with clear mental instability and an obvious desire for attention. Her name is Leora Vance. Kael's words cut like a blade. And you will address her with the respect due to the last surviving member of a murdered pack. The lawyer's expression tightened, but he inclined his head. Very well, Miss Vance. A young woman who claims to remember events from 10 years ago when she was a traumatized child. The defense will demonstrate that her testimony is unreliable at best, fabricated at worst. Then you'll have your chance during cross-examination, Kael said. But first, she speaks. Leora Vance, please take the stand. This was it. Leora stood on legs that felt distant and strange, walking to the raised platform in the center of the hall. Every eye in the room followed her. She could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their doubt pressing against her skin like physical weight. A chair had been provided, but Leora chose to stand. If she was going to do this, she'd do it on her feet. State your name for the record, Kael said formally. Leora Vance, daughter of Marcus and Alara Vance, sister to Brennan and Caleb Vance. Last surviving member of the Vance pack, destroyed 10 years ago on the night of the winter solstice. Her voice carried through the hall, steady and clear. She saw several wolves lean forward with interest. Tell the council what happened that night, Kael prompted. Leora took a breath. She'd spent 10 years trying not to think about this. Now she had to drag every detail into the light. I was 12. My father had hosted a dinner for neighboring pack leaders, a celebration for the winter season. I remember my mother laughing, my brothers arguing over who got to sit next to the visiting Alpha's daughter. The memories came faster now, sharper. I went to bed early. I was tired from helping prepare the feast, but sometime after midnight I woke to screaming. The hall was absolutely silent. At first I thought it was a nightmare, but then I smelled blood, smoke. I ran to my door, but my mother was there. She pushed me back, told me to hide in the cellar. I tried to argue, but Leora's voice cracked slightly. She said, "Live for us, little wolf. Remember us." Then she locked me in. She could see it all again. Her mother's face pale with fear, her hands shaking as she turned the key. The last time Leora had seen her alive. I climbed into the cellar through the kitchen. It's accessed by a trap door that's hidden under a rug. I pulled it closed over my head and I hid there while my family died above me. The words came mechanically now, a recitation of horror. I heard my brothers fighting, heard them fall, heard my father roaring orders before he went silent, heard my mother's last scream. Several wolves in the audience looked away. Others stared with morbid fascination. And then I heard footsteps, heavy boots walking through my house, searching room by room, and I heard voices. What did these voices say? Kael asked quietly. One of them said, "Check everywhere. The Alpha's daughter is small. She could be hiding in a cupboard, under a bed." Another voice answered, "Why bother? The contract said the whole pack. If she's here, she's dead already." And then Leora met Mordred's eyes across the hall. Then I heard a third voice, the one giving orders. He said, "Find her. I don't pay for sloppy work. Every Vance dies tonight, or you don't get the second half of your gold." The hall erupted, wolves shouting questions, Mordred's lawyers on their feet objecting, the whole room dissolving into chaos. Kael's voice cracked through the noise like a whip. "Silence!" The hall fell quiet, though the tension remained thick enough to choke on. "Did you recognize this third voice?" Kael asked. Leora nodded slowly. "I didn't know it then. I was 12 and terrified, and I couldn't place it. But I heard that voice every day for the next 10 years, ordering me to scrub floors, to serve meals, to stay invisible." She looked directly at Mordred. "It was Lord Castor Mordred's voice, and he's the one who ordered my family's murder." The chaos that followed was immediate and explosive. Mordred shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. "Lies! Complete fabrication! The traumatized delusions of a disturbed child. You kept me in your house. Lior's voice rose above his. For 10 years. You knew who I was. You had to know. And you kept me there like some kind of sick trophy. I took in a nameless orphan out of charity, Mordrin roared. And this is how you repay me? With baseless accusations and enough. Kael's single word cut through the shouting. Lord Mordrin, you will have your chance to defend yourself, but right now the witness is speaking. Mordrin sat, but his eyes promised murder. The lead lawyer stood. Your Majesty, with respect, this is exactly what we warned about. Unreliable testimony based on childhood trauma and 10 years of festering resentment. Miss Vance cannot possibly— I can prove it, Leora interrupted. The lawyer blinked. Excuse me? I said I can prove it. Leora's heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady. The night of the attack, I wasn't just hiding in the cellar. I was holding something. My brother Caleb's journal. He kept records of everything, pack business, visitors, disputes with neighboring territories. He wrote in it every night. She saw Kael's expression sharpen with sudden hope. Mordrin had gone very still. I grabbed it when I ran to hide because it was the last thing Caleb had been working on before dinner. It was sitting on the kitchen table. And when I finally escaped 2 days later, I took it with me. Leora met Kael's eyes. I've kept it hidden for 10 years, never told anyone. But Caleb wrote about Lord Mordrin in those final entries, about how he was pressuring our father to sell part of our territory, about threats he'd made, about meetings with mercenaries. Where is this journal? The lawyer demanded. In my room, the servants' quarters in the eastern wing. Leora's stomach dropped. The wing that burned last night. Silence fell like a stone. Mordrin's lawyer smiled slowly. How convenient. The only physical evidence to support your claims was destroyed in a fire that, I might add, you and His Majesty were conveniently present for. I can retrieve it, Leora said desperately. The servants' quarters were stone construction. The fire was intense, but if the journal was in the hiding place, I kept it. Your Majesty, this is absurd, the lawyer interrupted. We cannot pause council proceedings to search through fire-damaged ruins on the slim chance that a journal might exist. We can and we will, Kael said flatly. Council is adjourned until this afternoon. Lord Mordrin will remain under house supervision. Miss Vance and I will search the eastern wing. He looked at Mordrin. And if that journal is recovered intact, we'll see exactly how convenient this fire really was. The gavel came down. The hall dissolved into furious whispers. As wolves began filing out, Celine Thrace appeared at Kael's side, her expression cold. A word, Your Majesty? In private? Kael looked at Leora. She nodded. She understood political necessities even if she didn't like them. He followed Celine to an antechamber, leaving Leora standing alone in the rapidly emptying hall. She became aware of eyes on her. Turned to find an older woman watching her with an expression Leora couldn't read. The woman wore the colors of House Blackwood, one of the smaller but more respected packs. You have your mother's eyes, the woman said quietly. I knew Alara when we were young, before she mated your father. Leora's throat tightened. You knew my mother? She was fierce, kind, too good for the politics of this world. The woman stepped closer. I want you to know that some of us remember the Vance Pack, remember what they stood for. And if what you say about Mordrin is true, her jaw set, there are wolves who will stand with you when this comes to a vote. Thank you, Leora whispered. The woman nodded and left. Leora stood there, trying to process the unexpected support, when raised voices from the antechamber cut through her thoughts. Celine. And she sounded furious. Completely unacceptable, parading that girl in front of the entire council, making her into some kind of tragic heroine. She is a tragic figure. Kael's voice was tight with controlled anger. Her entire family was murdered. She deserves justice. She deserves to disappear back into whatever hole she crawled out of. This obsession of yours is embarrassing the crown, embarrassing me. Then perhaps, Kael said coldly, you should reconsider our arrangement. A pause. Then Celine's laugh, brittle and sharp. You can't break our engagement. Our families have been negotiating this alliance for 5 years. The treaties, the territorial agreements, were contingent on mutual benefit. But I'm the Alpha King, Celine. I don't need your family's territory or influence. I agreed to this match because it was politically expedient. But expedience has its limits. Another pause. When Celine spoke again, her voice had dropped to something dangerous. Is this about the mate bond? Because I've heard the whispers, KL. Everyone has. The way you look at her, the way you defend her. Disgust colored her tone. She's a servant, a nobody. Even if she is the last Vance, that pack was minor at best. Marrying her would make you a laughingstock. I'm not discussing this with you. You should be discussing it. Because if you think the council will accept a servant queen, get out. The command was absolute. Leora heard footsteps, then the door slamming open. Celine swept out of the antechamber, her face composed but her eyes blazing with fury. She saw Leora standing there and smiled coldly. Enjoying your moment in the sun? Celine asked. Make the most of it, because once Mordrin's lawyers are done with you, once the council sees you for what you really are, a traumatized child with delusions of importance, you'll go back to scrubbing floors. If you're lucky. She left in a swirl of ice blue silk. Kyle emerged a moment later, his expression thunderous. He saw Leora and some of the anger drained from his face. How much did you hear? Enough. Leora met his eyes. You don't have to defend me to her, to anyone. I know what this looks like. You know nothing, Kyle said fiercely. Celine is right about one thing. The council is watching, judging. But they can judge all they want. I won't apologize for seeking justice. And I won't apologize for the bond. Even if it costs you politically? Especially then. He moved closer, his silver eyes intense. I've spent 10 years being the perfect Alpha King. Playing politics, making alliances, putting duty above everything. But standing in that hall just now, watching you face down an entire council without flinching. He shook his head. You're braver than any wolf I've ever met. And if the council can't see that, they're fools. Leora's chest tightened with something warm and terrifying. We should go, she said, her voice coming out rougher than intended. Find the journal before Mordrin has another convenient accident. Kyle nodded. But as they left the hall together, Leora couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. Something that went beyond strategy and justice and political necessity. Something that felt dangerously like trust. The eastern wing was a devastation. Where once there had been elegant hallways and expensive furnishings, now there was only charred wood and ash. The acrid smell of smoke still hung thick in the air, making Leora's eyes water as they picked their way through the ruins. The servants' quarters were on the 3rd floor, Leora said, stepping carefully over a fallen beam. My room was at the far end of the hall. This section is structurally unsound, Kael warned. We should have brought the pack engineers. By the time they finish assessing safety, Mordrin's lawyers will have convinced half the council this journal never existed. Leora moved forward determinedly. I'm getting it now. The stairs were barely intact, groaning ominously under their weight. Leora tested each step before committing, Kael close behind her. Twice, boards cracked, and they had to redistribute their weight carefully. By the time they reached the 3rd floor, both were breathing hard. The hallway was worse than Leora had feared. The ceiling had partially collapsed, and the walls were blackened almost beyond recognition. She tried to orient herself, counting doors. There, she said, pointing to a doorway about halfway down the hall. That was my room. They made their way slowly, Kael testing the floor ahead of them. The room itself was a disaster. The bed reduced to a metal frame and ash, the small desk collapsed, the window shattered. But the walls were stone, and the floor had held. Where did you hide it? Kael asked. Leora moved to what had been her washstand. The basin was cracked but still there. She knelt beside it, running her hands along the baseboard until she found the loose stone. It came away easier than it should have. The mortar crumbled by heat. Behind it was a small hollow. And inside the hollow, wrapped in oilcloth that was singed but intact, was Caleb's journal. Leora's hand shook as she pulled it out. The leather cover was warped from heat, some of the pages brown around the edges, but it had survived. She opened it carefully, and her brother's familiar handwriting stared back at her. I can't believe it's still here, she whispered. Kael crouched beside her, his expression intent. What does it say? Lyra flipped to the final entries, the ones from the days before the massacre. Her heart clenched at seeing Caleb's words, his thoughts. this piece of him preserved when everything else had been destroyed. Here, she said, finding the relevant passage. 3 days before the attack, Lord Mordrin came again today. 3rd time this month. Father is growing tired of his offers to buy our eastern pastures. Told him no again, more firmly this time. Mordrin didn't take it well, made some veiled comments about how accidents happen to packs that don't know when to negotiate. She turned the page, and the next day, saw 3 mercenaries at the tavern in town, strangers. When I asked what brought them to our territory, they claimed to be passing through, but one of them wore the brand of the Iron Claws, a mercenary company known for taking assassination contracts. I told Father, he's doubled the watch. Cale's jaw was tight. What's the last entry? Leora's throat closed as she read her brother's final written words. The day of the attack. Father confronted Mordrin at the market, told him to stop sending threats, stop pressuring us to sell. Mordrin smiled and said Father would regret his stubbornness, that by the winter solstice, the Vance pack would understand the price of defiance. The words hung in the air between them. The winter solstice, the night of the massacre. This is it, Kyle said quietly. Combined with your testimony, this is enough to force a full investigation, to strip Mordrin of his council protections. Assuming we can get back to the hall with it, Leora said. Mordrin has to know we're here. If he's willing to burn his own house down to destroy evidence, what's to stop him from... The floor beneath them groaned ominously. Then it gave way. Leora felt herself falling, Kyle's hand grabbing for her, but missing. She hit the 2nd floor hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. The journal flew from her hands, landing a few feet away. Above her, she heard Kyle shouting her name, but the ringing in her ears made it sound distant. She tried to move, to push herself up, but pain lanced through her left leg. Footsteps. Multiple sets coming fast. Leora's vision swam as she looked up. Through the hole in the ceiling, she could see movement on the 3rd floor. But it wasn't Kyle. It was Mordrin's men. There, one of them shouted, the journal! Panic cleared the fog from Leora's mind. She lunged for the journal, her fingers closing around it just as Boots appeared at the edge of the hole above her. Give it up, girl, a gruff voice called down. Lord Mordrin says you've caused enough trouble. Leora clutched the journal to her chest and ran, or tried to. Her injured leg buckled on the first step, sending her crashing into the wall. The servants' quarters were a maze, and in her panicked state, she couldn't remember which direction led to safety. Behind her, she heard the men descending, their footsteps heavy and purposeful. She stumbled into what had been a linen closet, pressing herself into the shadows. Her leg throbbed, her head spun, but she kept the journal pressed tight against her ribs, protecting it with her body. The footsteps grew closer. Come out, Miss Vance, the gruff voice called. We don't want to hurt you. Lord Mordrin just wants his property back. The journal isn't his, Leora called back, hating how her voice shook. It belonged to my brother. Everything in this house belongs to Lord Mordrin, including you, girl. 10 years he fed you, clothed you, gave you purpose, and this is how you repay him, with lies and slander? Leora's hands tightened on the journal. They were trying to flank her. She could hear movement to her left and right. No escape route except back the way she'd come, and that way was blocked. She was trapped. Then she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold and hot all at once. A howl, deep and resonant, full of fury and authority. Kyle. The Alpha King's howl was answered by dozens of others, his personal guard, rushing to respond to their leader's call. The men hunting Leora froze, their confidence suddenly wavering. We should go, one of them muttered. Mordrin said, I don't care what Mordrin said, that's the Alpha King. If we're caught here... The argument was cut off by the sound of boots pounding up the stairs. Heavy, fast, accompanied by growls that raised every hair on Leora's neck. Kyle appeared at the end of the hallway, and Leora had never seen him look so dangerous. His eyes had gone full wolf, that eerie silver glow that marked a shifted alpha. His hands were partially transformed, claws extending from his fingertips. You have 3 seconds to explain, he said quietly, why you're hunting my mate through a burning building. The word, mate, hung in the air. Leora felt the bond surge in response, warm and fierce. One of Mordrin's men tried to run. Kale moved faster than should have been possible, catching him by the throat and slamming him against the wall. I said 3 seconds. That was 5. Cale's voice had dropped to a growl. Speak! Lord Mordrin sent us, the man choked out. Said to retrieve his property, the journal. Nothing about hurting the girl. She has a name, Kale snarled. And the journal isn't Mordrin's property. It's evidence in a murder investigation. He threw the man aside with contemptuous ease. Get out, all of you, and tell your master that the next time he sends thugs after Leora Vance, I'll consider it a declaration of war against the crown. The men fled, practically falling over themselves in their hurry to escape. Cale turned to Leora, his eyes still glowing, his breathing harsh. Are you hurt? My leg, she managed. I think it might be. He was beside her in an instant, his hands gentle despite their claws as he examined her injury. Bruised badly, maybe a hairline fracture. We need to get you out of here. He scooped her up without waiting for permission, cradling her against his chest. Did you get it, the journal? Leora held it up, and Kael's expression shifted from concern to fierce satisfaction. Then let's go end this. The afternoon session of the council was even more packed than the morning. Word had spread about the confrontation in the Eastern Wing, about Mordrin's men being caught trying to steal evidence, about the Alpha King carrying his injured mate through the ruins. Leora sat in the witness chair again, her leg bandaged, Caleb's journal resting on the table beside her. Across the hall, Mordrin looked like a cornered animal, his composure cracking at the edges, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. Cale stood before the assembled council, holding the journal open to the relevant passages. I present physical evidence, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. The journal of Caleb Vance, written in the days before the massacre. In his own hand, he documents Lord Mordrin's threats, his presence in Vance territory, his increasingly desperate attempts to purchase land that the Vance pack refused to sell. Kael read the final entry aloud, letting the words sink in. By the winter solstice, the Vance pack would understand the price of defiance. Those are Lord Mordrin's own words, recorded by a 17-year-old boy who would be dead within hours. The hall was deadly silent. Combined with Leora Vance's testimony about what she heard that night, combined with the financial records showing large payments to known mercenary companies around the time of the attack, combined with the fact that Lord Mordrin personally benefited from the Vance Pack's destruction, Kael's eyes swept the assembled wolves. The Crown moves for immediate arrest pending full investigation. Mordrin's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Majesty, a journal entry is not proof of murder. My client made a statement in anger, nothing more. Teenage boys exaggerate, dramatize. Then how do you explain, Cale interrupted coldly, why your client sent armed men to steal this journal less than 3 hours ago? Why destroy evidence if you're innocent? Mordrin stood, his face purple with rage. That girl is a liar and a thief. I gave her shelter for 10 years and she... You kept the last witness to your crime in your own house. Leora's voice rang out, strong despite the pain in her leg. You kept me close so you could control me, watch me, make sure I never remembered enough to threaten you, but you made a mistake, Lord Mordrin. You taught me to be invisible, and invisible people see everything. Mordrin's face twisted. You ungrateful little... Enough! Kael's voice cracked like a whip. Council, I call for an immediate vote. All those in favor of stripping Lord Castor Mordrin of his council protections and opening a formal murder investigation? Hands rose across the hall. Not all of them. Some lords still looked uncertain, caught between tradition and justice. But more than half the council voted in favor. It was enough. Motion passes, Kael said. Lord Mordrin, you are hereby stripped of your council seat pending investigation. You will be held under guard until... No! Mordrin's roar shook the hall, and then, faster than Leora could track, he shifted. The transformation was brutal, incomplete, a half shift that turned him into something between man and wolf. He launched himself toward Leora, claws extended, teeth bared in a snarl of pure rage. Leora didn't think. She just moved. She threw herself sideways, the chair toppling, Caleb's journal flying from the table. Mordrin's claws raked across her shoulder, tearing fabric and flesh. Pain exploded through her, white-hot and consuming, and then Kael was there. The Alpha King hit Mordrin like a freight train, the two of them crashing into the council floor with bone-crushing force. What followed was less a fight than an execution. Kael was younger, stronger, and absolutely furious. He drove Mordrin back with savage efficiency, claws raking, teeth snapping. "You dare attack my mate!" Each word was punctuated with a blow. Mordrin tried to fight back, but he was no match. Within seconds, Kael had him pinned, one clawed hand around Mordrin's throat. "Give me one reason," Kael snarled, "why I shouldn't end you right here." "Do it!" Mordrin spat. Blood ran from his mouth. "Kill me. Prove you're no better than—" "Your Majesty, stop!" Celine's voice cut through the chaos. "You'll make him a martyr. Give him a trial. Let the council see justice done properly." Kael's hand tightened on Mordrin's throat. For a moment, Leora thought he might actually kill the man. Then slowly, he released his grip. "You're right," Kael said coldly. He stood, returning to human form, his clothes torn and bloodied. "Take him to the cells, triple guard, and someone get a healer for Leora." Guards rushed forward, dragging a barely conscious Mordrin away. The hall dissolved into chaos, wolves shouting, arguing, demanding answers. But Leora only had eyes for Kael as he crossed to where she sat clutching her bleeding shoulder. He knelt beside her, his hands gentle as they examined the wound. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have anticipated he'd attack." "You saved my life," Leora interrupted. "Again." "You saved your own life. I just finished what you started." His silver eyes met hers, intense and burning. "You were magnificent, by the way. Standing up there, facing down the entire council without flinching. I was terrified. I know. That's what made it magnificent." His hand cupped her uninjured cheek. "You're going to be okay. The healer's coming, and the wound isn't deep." "Kael," Leora caught his hand. "You called me your mate, in front of everyone." He went very still. "I know. You also haven't asked if I accept the bond." "I know that too." Kael's expression was unreadable. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have presumed. But when I saw Mordrin's men hunting you, when I thought I might lose you—" He looked away. "I wasn't thinking politically. I was just reacting." The healer arrived, interrupting whatever Leora might have said. As the woman began treating her shoulder, Leora watched Kael stand and address the council, his authority absolute despite his disheveled appearance. And she realized something that should have terrified her, but instead felt like coming home. She didn't want to reject the bond. Somewhere in the chaos of the last few days, between throwing wine and revealing secrets and standing before the council, she'd stopped seeing Kael as just the Alpha King, started seeing him as the man who'd spent 10 years seeking justice for a pack he'd never met, who'd believed her when no one else would, who'd called her his mate and meant it as both protection and promise. The bond hummed between them, warm and insistent, and for the first time, Leora didn't fight it. She let herself feel it, accept it. The moment she did, Kael's head snapped toward her across the hall. Their eyes met, and she saw the exact instant he felt it too, the bond clicking into place, no longer one-sided but mutual. His expression transformed. Relief, joy, something deeper that made Leora's breath catch. Then Celine was there, stepping between them, breaking the moment. "We need to talk," she said to Kael, her voice carrying an edge Leora had never heard before. "Now, in private." Kael looked like he wanted to refuse, but political necessity won out. He nodded curtly and followed Celine from the hall. Leora sat there with the healer bandaging her shoulder, watching them disappear into the antechamber. She told herself it didn't matter. Told herself that whatever Celine wanted to say, it wouldn't change what Leora had just felt. The bond settling into place like a key turning in a lock. But 5 minutes passed. Then 10. And when Celine finally emerged alone, her expression was triumphant. "Where's Kael?" Leora demanded. Celine smiled. "The Alpha King is indisposed. He asked me to inform you that council business will keep him occupied for the remainder of the evening. He suggests you rest and recover." Her eyes glittered with malice. "After all, you've had such an exhausting day, haven't you? All that testifying and bleeding and desperately trying to matter?" She swept away before Leora could respond. Something felt wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. The bond that had been humming with warmth moments ago suddenly felt distant, muffled, like someone had thrown a blanket over it. Leora tried to stand, but her injured leg and shoulder made her movements clumsy. The healer pushed her gently back down. You need to rest, dear. You've been through quite an ordeal. I need to find Kael. The Alpha King can take care of himself. The healer's smile was kind but firm. You, however, need sleep. Here, drink this. It'll help with the pain. She offered a small vial of amber liquid. Leora hesitated, but the pain in her shoulder was intense enough that she took it gratefully. The medicine was bitter, coating her tongue. Within seconds, drowsiness began to pull at her consciousness. That's it, the healer murmured. Just close your eyes. Leora fought it, but her body was exhausted, her injuries draining what little strength she had left. The hall was emptying, wolves dispersing now that the dramatic confrontation was over. She was alone except for the healer. Her eyes drifted shut. The last thing she saw was the healer's kind smile. The last thing she felt was the bond going completely, impossibly silent. And the last thing she thought before darkness claimed her was that Selene had looked far too pleased when she'd left that antechamber. Something was very, very wrong. Leora woke to darkness and the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. Her head throbbed with a sickening rhythm, and when she tried to move, her body refused to cooperate. Heavy. Everything felt impossibly heavy. Drugged. She'd been drugged. The realization cut through the fog clouding her mind. That healer, the bitter medicine. Selene's triumphant smile. Leora forced her eyes open, blinking against the dimness. She was in a room she didn't recognize, lying on a narrow cot. Stone walls. No windows. A single oil lamp flickering in the corner. A cell. Panic surged, clearing the last of the drugged haze. Leora pushed herself upright despite her protesting muscles, her injured shoulder screaming in protest. The bond with Kael was still there, but wrong, muted and distant, like trying to hear someone shouting from underwater. The door opened with a rusty creak. Selene Thrace stepped inside, her ice blue gown replaced with practical riding clothes. She looked pleased with herself in a way that made Leora's wolf snarl beneath her skin. You're awake. Good. I was beginning to worry the dose was too strong. Selene closed the door behind her with careful precision. We have much to discuss, you and I. Leora's throat was dry as dust. Where's Kael? The Alpha King is otherwise occupied. I made sure of it. Selene moved closer, studying Leora like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. You really thought you could waltz in and disrupt everything, didn't you? Play the tragic survivor, bat your eyes at the Alpha King, and suddenly you matter? I testified to the truth. Mordrin murdered my family. Oh, I don't care about Mordrin, Selene waved dismissively. Fool got himself caught. That's his problem. My concern is you and the inconvenient bond you formed with my fiancé. Leora pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. He called me his mate in front of the entire council. Your engagement is over. Is it? Selene smiled coldly. Because from where I'm standing, you're locked in a cell beneath House Mordrin while Kael believes you're safely recovering in the guest wing. The healer who drugged you? Works for my family. The guards outside? Loyal to House Thrace. And in approximately 2 hours, you'll be loaded into a carriage and transported far, far from the northern territories. Ice flooded Leora's veins. You can't just kidnap me. Kael will be told you ran away, that you couldn't handle the pressure of the trial, the trauma of facing Mordrin, the reality of what being the Alpha King's mate would mean. Selene examined her nails casually. I'll comfort him, of course, help him through the disappointment, and within a few months, our wedding will proceed as planned. He'll know I didn't run. The bond can be blocked, temporarily, at least. Selene pulled a small vial from her pocket, the same amber liquid the healer had given Leora. Wolfsbane extract, mixed with a few other choice ingredients, clouds the mate bond, makes it nearly impossible to sense distance or direction. Kael will feel that you're alive, but he won't be able to track you. Her smile sharpened. And by the time the drug wears off, you'll be so far away that it won't matter. Leora's mind raced, looking for options, for weaknesses in Selene's plan. Someone will notice I'm missing. The council is in chaos after Mordrin's arrest. Half of them are arguing about succession, the other half are worried about what other secrets might come to light. No one is paying attention to one injured servant girl. Celine moved to the door. I'd say I'm sorry, but we both know I'm not. You were a complication. Now you'll be a footnote. The tragic mate who couldn't handle the pressure and disappeared. She left, the lock clicking into place with brutal finality. Leora stood in the center of the cell, her heart pounding, her wolf howling with fury beneath her skin. She'd survived 10 years in Mordrin's house, survived the massacre that killed her family, survived standing before the council and staring down her family's murderer. She wasn't about to be undone by Celine Thrace's jealousy. Moving carefully, Leora examined the cell. The walls were solid stone, old but well-maintained. The door was thick oak reinforced with iron. The lock was beyond her ability to pick, even if she had tools. But the cell had been built to hold prisoners, not wolves. Leora closed her eyes, reaching for the part of herself she'd kept buried for so long. Her wolf surged forward eagerly, ready to be unleashed after years of forced docility. The shift began. Not the graceful transformation of a practiced alpha, but something rougher, driven by desperation and rage. Pain lanced through her injured shoulder and leg as bones began to reshape, but she pushed through it. Her body fought her, weakened by drugs and trauma, but her will was stronger. The transformation completed with a snarl. Leora's wolf form was smaller than a full-grown alpha's, lean from years of poor food and hard work. But small had its advantages. The gap beneath the door was narrow, barely 6 inches. But wolves could compress their bodies in ways that seemed impossible. Leora dropped to her belly and began to squeeze through, ignoring the way the rough wood scraped against her injured shoulder. Inch by agonizing inch, she pushed forward. The guards outside were talking in low voices. She could hear them clearly now with her wolf's enhanced senses. Seems excessive, one was saying. She's just a girl. Lady Thrace pays well for no questions. We take the servant to the border. We get enough gold to retire. Simple. What if the Alpha King finds out? He won't. Lady Thrace has it covered. Now shut up and drink your... Leora burst through the gap, shifting back to human form in a fluid motion she barely remembered how to execute. The 2 guards spun, hands going for weapons, but she was faster. Years of surviving Mordrin's cruelty had taught her where to hit to incapacitate quickly. She drove her palm into the first guard's throat, following with a knee to his gut that doubled him over. The second guard managed to draw his blade, but Leora was already moving, using his own momentum against him to send him crashing into the wall. Both men went down hard. Leora grabbed the keys from the first guard's belt and ran. The cells were in the lowest level of House Mordrin, the old dungeons that dated back to when the estate had been a fortress. Leora navigated by memory and instinct, her wolf's senses guiding her through the darkness. Behind her, she heard shouting as the guards raised the alarm. She burst into the main house and immediately realized her mistake. The entrance hall was filled with wolves, Celine's people, judging by their colors. They turned as one when she appeared, weapons drawn. "There!" someone shouted. "Don't let her escape!" Leora ran for the side exit, but 3 guards moved to block it. She changed direction, heading for the grand staircase, her injured leg protesting every step. The guards gave chase, their boots thundering on marble. She made it halfway up the stairs before a hand grabbed her ankle, yanking hard. Leora crashed down, her shoulder hitting the edge of a step with sickening force. Stars exploded across her vision. Strong hands grabbed her arms, hauling her upright. She struggled, but there were too many of them, and her body was giving out, weakened by injury and drugs. "Got her," one of the guards called out. Lady Thrace, we..." The front doors exploded inward. Kyle stood in the doorway backlit by moonlight, and he looked like vengeance incarnate. His eyes glowed full wolf silver, his hands already shifting to claws. Behind him, his personal guard fanned out, 24 of the most dangerous wolves in the Northern Territories. "Release her, now." The command rolled through the hall like thunder. The guards holding Leora immediately let go, stumbling backward as if burned. Kael's eyes found Leora on the stairs, taking in her disheveled appearance, her injuries, the guards surrounding her. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Someone," he said quietly, "is going to explain why my mate is being held captive in Castor Mordrin's dungeons. And that explanation better be very, very good." Celine appeared at the top of the stairs, her expression carefully composed. "Your Majesty, thank goodness you're here. Miss Vance became hysterical after the trial, attacking staff, making wild accusations. We were forced to restrain her for her own safety. Liar! Leora's voice cracked but held strong. She drugged me, locked me in a cell, was planning to have me transported away so you'd think I ran. The poor girl is clearly delusional, Celine interrupted smoothly. The trauma of today's events has been too much. She needs medical care, not shut up. Kael's words cut like razors. He moved up the stairs with predatory grace, his guards following. When he reached Leora, his hands were gentle as they examined her face, her injuries. Did they hurt you? I'm okay, Leora managed. But Kael, she gave me wolfsbane extract to block the bond. She was going to... I heard. His jaw clenched. I felt it. The bond going silent. I tore this estate apart looking for you. His eyes cut to Celine with lethal focus. You blocked a mate bond. That's a capital crime under pack law. Celine's composure finally cracked. You can't prove anything. It's her word against mine. And mine, a new voice added. The woman from the council, the one who'd known Leora's mother, stepped forward from among the crowd that had gathered. I saw Lady Thrace entering the dungeons earlier. Thought it was strange, but didn't question it. I'll testify to what I saw. Another voice joined in. I saw her speaking with the healer who treated Miss Vance. Saw money change hands. Then another. My cousin serves in House Thrace. She told me Lady Celine has been planning to eliminate any threats to her engagement for months. More voices, more witnesses, all of them stepping forward. Wolves who'd watched Celine's machinations, who'd suspected but said nothing until now. Celine's face went white. You can't. I'm the daughter of House Thrace. You can't arrest me based on servant gossip. I can arrest you based on attempted kidnapping of the Alpha King's mate, Kael said coldly. Add to that assault, conspiracy, and interference with a mate bond. He gestured to his guards. Take her to the cells, the real ones, with proper guards, and someone find that healer who's been working for her. As Celine was dragged away, her composure shattered completely. This isn't over. My family has allies on the council. They'll never let you... Your family's allies are currently being investigated for their connection to Mordrin's crimes, Kael interrupted. Turns out when you dig into one conspiracy, you often find others. House Thrace has been playing dangerous games for too long. Today, those games end. Celine's protests faded as she was hauled down the stairs. Kael turned his full attention back to Leora, his expression transforming from cold fury to warm concern. Can you walk? I think so. He helped her down the stairs anyway, one arm supporting her weight, the bond between them blazing back to full strength now that the wolfsbane was wearing off. Leora felt it settle into place properly for the first time. No barriers, no distance, just pure connection. It felt like coming home. They made it to the entrance hall before a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the shattered doors, Leora could see wolves gathering in the courtyard. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all holding torches that turned the night bright as day. What's happening? She asked. Kael's expression was grim. The council reconvened after I left to find you. They've been deliberating on Mordrin's fate and the investigation into House Thrace's activities. I think they've reached a verdict. An older wolf stepped forward from the crowd. Lord Blackwood. Leora recognized him from the trial. He bowed formally to Kael. Your Majesty, the council has concluded its emergency session. Lord Castor Mordrin has confessed to ordering the massacre of the Vance pack. In exchange for confession, he's requested death by combat rather than execution. Kael's jaw tightened. Denied. He doesn't get an honorable death after what he's done. With respect, Your Majesty, he's invoked the old laws. As an accused lord, he has the right to trial by combat, and he's named his opponent. Who? Lord Blackwood's eyes shifted to Leora. He's called out Leora Vance, claims that as the last of her pack, she's the only one with the right to deliver his punishment. If she refuses or loses, he walks free by council law. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Leora felt the blood drain from her face. That's insane. I'm injured. I haven't fought in years. I'm not... You're an Alpha's daughter, Kael said quietly. By bloodline, you have the right. But you also have the right to refuse. I can fight in your place as your mate, No! The word came out before Leora fully processed what she was saying. If Mordrin wants to face me, then let him. He killed my family. This should be between us. Leora, you can barely stand. Your shoulder is injured, your leg is weak, and you've been drugged. This isn't a fair fight. Nothing about what he did to my family was fair. Leora pulled away from Kael's support, standing on her own despite the pain. He took everything from me. My parents, my brothers, my childhood, my name. For 10 years I scrubbed his floors while he smiled and pretended to be a benevolent lord. If he wants combat, I'll give it to him, and I'll show him what the last Vance is capable of. Kael looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. You don't have to prove anything. Yes, I do. Not to the council, not to you, to myself. Leora met his silver eyes steadily. I've been running and hiding for 10 years. It's time I stood and fought. A long silence. Then Kael nodded slowly. If you're certain, I won't stop you, but I will make sure the fight is as fair as possible. He turned to Lord Blackwood. The combat will be conducted under full council supervision, human form only, no shifting, no claws. First to yield or die. And Leora gets 1 hour to prepare. Lord Blackwood bowed. As you command, Your Majesty. The crowd began to disperse, wolves moving to prepare the courtyard for the combat. Kael pulled Leora aside, his expression torn between respect and fear. You don't have to do this, he said again, quieter this time. I know, but I need to. Leora touched his face gently. He's haunted me for 10 years. I need to face him. End this. Then at least let me help you prepare. Kael's hands found hers, squeezing gently. And Leora, whatever happens out there, know that you've already won. You survived. You testified. You brought him to justice. Anything after that is just closure. Closure, Leora repeated. The word felt foreign on her tongue. Could she really close the chapter on her family's death? On 10 years of grief and fear? She was about to find out. The hour passed too quickly and too slowly all at once. Kael's personal healer did what she could for Leora's injuries, wrapping her shoulder properly, giving her something for the pain that wouldn't cloud her mind like the wolfsbane had. A servant brought food and water, which Leora forced herself to consume despite her churning stomach. And Kael stayed by her side the entire time, not offering empty reassurances but solid presence. He's older, Kael said, his tone clinical as he helped Leora stretch her stiff muscles. That means his reflexes aren't what they used to be. But he's got experience. He'll expect you to fight like an alpha's daughter, trained, formal, by the rules. So I should fight dirty? I didn't say that. Kael's lips quirked slightly. But if you happen to use your small size and speed to your advantage, no one could fault you. Leora tested her injured leg, wincing at the dull throb. How dirty are we talking? Survival dirty, street dirty, whatever it takes to walk out of that courtyard alive. Kael's expression turned serious. Because that's what matters, Leora. Not honor or revenge or proving a point, just survival. I survived for 10 years in his house. I can survive this. I know you can. He pulled her close, careful of her injuries. But if at any point you want to yield, do it. I'll deal with the political fallout. Your life is worth more than pride. Leora rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the bond hum between them. Thank you for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Always. Too soon, the hour was up. The crowd in the courtyard had swelled. It seemed like every wolf in the territory had come to witness this. They formed a circle around a cleared space, torches burning bright, faces painted with firelight and shadow. Mordrin stood in the center looking remarkably composed for a man who'd been beaten and imprisoned hours earlier. He'd been given fresh clothes and someone had tended his wounds from the earlier fight with Kael. His eyes found Leora as she approached, and he smiled. "Hello, little ghost," he said, "finally ready to stop hiding?" Leora didn't respond. She stepped into the circle, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. The courtyard went silent. Lord Blackwood stood between them, his voice carrying. Trial by combat, called by the accused under ancient law. Caster Mordrin of House Mordrin versus Leora Vance, last of the Vance pack, human form only, first to yield or fall, May the truth reveal itself in blood. He stepped back, leaving Liora and Mordrin facing each other across 10 feet of packed dirt. Any last words? Mordrin asked, rolling his shoulders. Before I finish what I started 10 years ago? Liora met his eyes steadily. You couldn't finish it then. You won't finish it now. We'll see. He moved. For an older wolf, Mordrin was fast. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his fist already swinging toward Leora's face. She ducked on instinct, feeling the air whistle past her ear, and rolled to the side. Kale's words echoed in her head. Small, fast, dirty. Mordrin turned with her, but Leora was already moving, staying just out of his reach. He was bigger, stronger, but she was lighter on her feet. She circled him, watching his stance, looking for weaknesses. He attacked again, a combination of punches that would have crushed her ribs if they'd connected. Leora dodged, using her smaller frame to slip between his guard. She landed a quick jab to his kidney, not enough to seriously hurt, but enough to sting. Mordrin snarled and backhanded her. The blow caught her shoulder, her injured shoulder, and pain exploded white-hot through her body. Leora stumbled, barely keeping her feet. The crowd murmured, some sympathetic, some excited by the violence. What's wrong, little ghost? Mordrin taunted, stalking toward her. Did you really think you could beat me? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. A scared little girl hiding in cellars. Leora's vision swam with pain, but beneath it, something else was building. Not fear, not despair. Rage. Pure, incandescent, 10 years in the making rage. You're right, she said, straightening despite the pain. I was a scared little girl. But you know what scared little girls learn? She moved forward instead of back, surprising him. We learn where it hurts most. She drove her knee into his groin with everything she had. Mordrin's eyes went wide. He doubled over with a choked gasp, and Leora didn't give him time to recover. She brought her elbow down on the back of his neck, following with a kick to his knee that sent him crashing to the ground. The crowd roared. Leora stood over Mordrin, breathing hard, her shoulders screaming. You killed my parents! You killed my brothers! You kept me in your house like a trophy for 10 years. She kicked him in the ribs, punctuating each word. But I survived. Mordrin tried to rise, but his injured knee gave out. He looked up at her, and for the first time Leora saw genuine fear in his eyes. Yield, she said coldly, or I'll finish this. Never. He lunged from the ground, catching her off guard, his hands closing around her throat. They went down together, Mordrin's weight crushing her into the dirt. His grip tightened, cutting off her air. Leora clawed at his hands, but her injured shoulder made her weak on one side. The crowd noise faded to a distant roar. Black spots danced across her vision. This was it. After everything, he was going to win. Then she felt it. The bond with Kyle blazing like fire, pouring strength into her. Not his strength, but a reminder of her own. Of everything she'd survived, everything she'd endured. Leora stopped trying to pry his hands away. Instead, she drove her thumbs into his eyes. Mordrin screamed and released her, clutching his face. Leora sucked in air, coughing and gasping, then forced herself upright. She grabbed a fistful of Mordrin's hair, yanking his head back. I'm not a ghost, she rasped. I'm the last Vance, and you're going to remember that name in whatever hell you end up in. She brought his head down hard against her rising knee. Once. Twice. The third time, he went limp. Silence fell over the courtyard. Leora stood over Mordrin's unconscious body, swaying, her throat bruised, her shoulder bleeding through the bandages, her entire body screaming in protest. But she was standing. Lord Blackwood stepped forward, examining Mordrin. Unconscious, unable to continue. The victory goes to Leora Vance. The crowd exploded. Some wolves cheered, others looked stunned, but all of them were staring at Leora with something like respect. Kale was suddenly there, catching her as her legs finally gave out. He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest. You did it, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You actually did it. Is he alive? Unfortunately. Kale's expression was grim. But the council will handle him now. Execution by formal decree. His lands and titles forfeit. House Mordrin is ended. Leora looked back at Mordrin's crumpled form as Kyle carried her from the circle. She should have felt satisfaction, triumph, victory. Instead, she just felt tired. But beneath the exhaustion, something else was beginning to bloom. Something that felt almost like peace. The healers worked on Leora for hours. Her shoulder required stitches. Her throat was bruised but not permanently damaged. Her leg needed a proper splint. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Kael hadn't left her side once. "You should sleep," he said, brushing hair back from her face. "So should you." "I will, after I know you're okay." Leora caught his hand, lacing their fingers together. The bond hummed contentedly between them, settled and sure. "I'm okay. Better than okay. For the first time in 10 years, I'm free." Kael's expression softened. "What will you do now?" Now? Leora hadn't let herself think that far ahead. The trial, the combat, survival, those had filled her entire world. But now, "The council voted this morning," Kael said quietly. "Before the combat. They formally recognized you as the last of the Vance bloodline. Your family's lands, titles, and pack rights have been restored. You're no longer just Leora Vance, you're Alpha Leora Vance, head of the Vance pack." The words didn't feel real. There is no Vance pack, they're all dead. Then you'll rebuild it. Scattered wolves looking for a home, families who've lost their packs. You have the land, the resources, and now... Kael smiled slightly. You have the reputation. The wolf who survived, who testified, who faced down her family's murder in single combat and won. I had help. Leora squeezed his hand. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Kael leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other beyond crisis and politics. But the bond is real, Leora, and I want to see where this goes. If you'll have me. Leora felt tears prick her eyes. But for the first time in forever, they were good tears. Happy tears. I spent 10 years being invisible, she whispered. Being nothing. Then you looked at me like I was someone worth seeing, worth fighting for, worth... She took a shaky breath. Yes, I want to see where this goes too. Kael kissed her then, gentle, careful of her injuries, but full of promise. The bond blazed between them, warm and right and whole. When they finally pulled apart, Leora rested against his chest, listening to his heartbeat sync with hers. What happens now? She asked. Now? Kael's voice rumbled with quiet satisfaction. Now we rest, heal, and then we start building something new. Your pack, our bond, a future that isn't defined by tragedy. Sounds good. Leora's eyes were already drifting closed, exhaustion finally claiming her. Kael? Thank you for never giving up on finding me. Always. His arms tightened around her. I'll always find you, Leora Vance, no matter how far you run or how deep you hide. You're my mate, my partner, my equal. The words followed Leora down into sleep, not the terrified unconsciousness of being drugged or the exhausted collapse after combat, but real peaceful rest. For the first time in 10 years, she slept without nightmares. And when she woke, it would be to a new life, one where she wasn't hiding or running or surviving, one where she was finally, truly, home. Leora woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the scent of mountain pine. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory flooded back in a rush. The trial. The combat. Kael's arms around her as she'd finally let herself rest. She sat up carefully, testing her injuries. Her shoulder was stiff but healing. Her throat still ached where Mordrin had tried to choke the life from her. But she was alive. Whole. Free. The door opened quietly, and Kael entered carrying a tray laden with food. He'd changed from his formal clothes into simple riding gear, and there was something different about his expression. Lighter, maybe. Less burdened. You're awake, he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. How do you feel? Like I fought a lord twice my size and somehow won. Leora accepted the cup of tea he offered, wrapping her hands around its warmth. How long did I sleep? 16 hours. The healers said your body needed it. Between the injuries, the drugs, and the combat, you were running on pure will by the end. Kale sat on the edge of the bed, studying her face. You scared me, you know. When Mordrin had his hands around your throat and you just stopped fighting. I didn't stop fighting. I changed tactics. Leora met his worried gaze steadily. He expected me to panic, to claw at his hands like a victim, so I gave him something worse. Kale's expression shifted to something between horror and admiration. Remind me never to underestimate you. Good policy. Leora sipped the tea, herbal, soothing, probably laced with something to help her heal. What's happened while I was asleep? Did they execute Mordrin? Yes. This morning at dawn, by council decree. Swift and final. Kale's voice was flat, clinical. Celine Thrace is awaiting trial for conspiracy and attempted kidnapping. Her family is under investigation for their connections to Mordrin's network. Several other lords have been implicated. So it's over. The immediate crisis, yes, but there's still work to do. Kale reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. The council has formally restored the Vance territories to you. All lands, holdings, and rights that belong to your father now belong to you. You're a recognized alpha with full council status. Leora took the parchment with trembling hands, staring at the official seals and signatures. Her father's name, her mother's, and now hers, Leora Vance, alpha and head of pack. I don't know how to be an alpha, she whispered. I was 12 when they died. I never learned. You'll learn, and you won't be alone. Kyle covered her hand with his. I'll help. The council will help. And your pack? There is no pack. It's just me. For now. But that can change. Kale's eyes held hers. There are scattered wolves all over the territories. People who lost their packs, who've been living as rogues or absorbed into other families without really belonging. When word spreads that the Vance pack is being rebuilt, that there's an alpha who understands what it means to lose everything and survive anyway, they'll come, Leora. They'll want to be part of what you're building. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't? You faced down the entire council. You testified against your family's murderer. You fought him in single combat while injured and won. Kyle's voice was fierce with conviction. If that's not the mark of a true alpha, I don't know what is. Leora wanted to believe him, but 10 years of being told she was nothing, worth nothing, couldn't be erased in a few days. I need to see it, she said suddenly. The Vance lands. My family's home. Before I can decide anything, I need to see what's left. Kyle studied her for a long moment, then nodded. We'll leave this afternoon if you're well enough to travel. I'll have horses prepared. I'm well enough. Leora pushed back the covers, her body protesting but cooperating. I've waited 10 years to go home. I'm not waiting another day. House. The ride to the Vance territories took most of the afternoon. Kyle had insisted on a small escort, just 4 of his personal guards, but kept them at a respectful distance, giving Leora space to process. The landscape grew familiar in a way that made her chest ache. That curve in the river where she and her brothers used to fish. The old oak tree they'd climbed despite their mother's warnings. The meadow where her father had taught her to shift for the first time. All of it exactly as she remembered. All of it completely changed by the weight of 10 years and a massacre. They crested a hill, and Leora's breath caught. The Vance estate lay in the valley below. The main house was still standing. Its stone construction had survived the fire that killed her family, but it was overgrown with vines and neglect. The outbuildings had collapsed. The fences were broken. The fields that had once been golden with wheat were wild with weeds. I can have work crews sent immediately, Kyle said quietly. Rebuild the structures, clear the fields. No. Leora's voice was hoarse. Not yet. I need to see it first. Alone. Kyle looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. We'll wait here. Take all the time you need. Leora dismounted and walked down the hill alone, her heart pounding harder with every step. The front gate hung crooked on broken hinges. The path to the house was overgrown with brambles that caught at her clothes like grasping hands. She pushed through them anyway. The front door was unlocked, or more accurately, the lock had rusted away. It swung open with a groan that echoed through the empty house. Inside was devastation painted in dust and decay. The grand entrance hall where her mother had welcomed guests was filled with leaves blown in through broken windows. The portrait of her family that had hung above the fireplace was gone. Stolen or destroyed, Leora didn't know which. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, seeing memories superimposed over the ruin. The dining room where they'd shared meals and laughter. The library where her father had taught her to read. The music room where her mother had sung. All of it empty, silent, dead. Leora climbed the stairs to the second floor, her feet finding the path by muscle memory. Her old bedroom was at the end of the hall. The door hung open, and inside, it looked like a child's room frozen in time. The bed she'd slept in, its covers still rumpled from that last morning, the shelf of books she'd been collecting, the stuffed wolf her father had given her for her 8th birthday, sitting on the pillow. Leora picked up the toy with shaking hands. It was dusty and faded, but intact. She pressed it to her chest and finally let herself cry. Not the silent tears she'd shed in Mordrin's house when she thought no one was watching. Not the controlled grief she'd presented to the council, but deep, racking sobs that tore from her chest like physical things. She cried for her parents, for her brothers, for the little girl who'd hidden in a cellar while her world burned, for 10 years of invisibility and fear and survival. And when the tears finally stopped, when she was empty and wrung out and somehow lighter, Leora wiped her eyes and looked around the room again. This was her past, her history, her pain. But it didn't have to be her future. She stood, tucking the stuffed wolf under her arm, and walked back downstairs. Out the front door, up the hill to where Kyle waited with infinite patience. He took one look at her tear-stained face and opened his arms. Leora walked into them without hesitation, letting him hold her while the sun sank toward the mountains. "I want to rebuild," she said into his chest. "Not just the buildings, everything. The pack, the community, the life that was here before Mordrin destroyed it. Then we'll rebuild it together." Kyle's voice rumbled against her ear. "Whatever you need, however long it takes." Leora pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Why? Why are you doing all this for me? For a pack that isn't yours? For land you have no claim to?" "Because you're my mate. Your fights are my fights. Your pain is my pain." Kale cupped her face gently. "And because I've spent 10 years watching injustice go unanswered. Helping you rebuild the Vance Pack isn't charity, Leora. It's the beginning of making things right." "I don't deserve you. You deserve everything." He kissed her forehead softly. "And I'm going to spend however long it takes proving that to you." The rebuilding began the next day. Kyle was as good as his word. Within a week, work crews arrived from the capital. Builders, craftsmen, farmers who knew how to coax life from neglected land. The Vance estate transformed from a tomb of memories into a construction site buzzing with activity. But more than the physical rebuilding, word began to spread through the territories. The last Vance survived. She'd testified against her family's murderer. She'd fought him in single combat and won. She was rebuilding her pack and looking for wolves to join her. They came in a trickle at first. A lone wolf who'd been living rough in the mountains for 3 years after her pack was destroyed by disease. A family of 5 who'd been absorbed into another pack but never really accepted. An elderly couple whose children had died in a border dispute and who had nowhere else to go. Leora welcomed them all. She gave them rooms in the estate as it was rebuilt, or helped them construct their own homes on Vance land. She listened to their stories, their losses, their hopes, and slowly, painfully, she began to understand what it meant to be an alpha. It wasn't about power or authority. It was about responsibility, about creating a space where wolves who'd lost everything could find belonging again. 3 months after the trial, Leora stood in the great hall of the restored Vance estate and looked at the faces gathered around her. 37 wolves, the exact number that had died in the massacre, all of them looking to her for guidance, for leadership, for home. "I know this isn't how any of us expected to find ourselves," Leora said, her voice carrying through the hall. "Most of you have lost as much or more than I have. You've survived things that should have broken you, and yet here you are choosing to build something new instead of giving up." She saw nods, recognition in their eyes. I can't promise this will be easy. The Vance pack was destroyed once, and rebuilding it means making ourselves visible, making ourselves a target. But I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, as long as I'm standing, no one will hurt this pack again. We protect each other. We stand together. And we prove that survival isn't just about living. It's about refusing to let the people who hurt us win. The response was immediate. A chorus of howls rising from 37 throats, filling the hall with sound and power and something that felt like hope. Kale stood at the back of the room, watching with an expression that made Leora's chest tight. When the howling faded and the pack began to disperse for the evening meal, he approached her. "That was well done," he said quietly.
"You're a natural leader." "I'm terrified," Leora admitted. "What if I make mistakes? What if I can't protect them?" "You will make mistakes. Every alpha does, but you'll learn from them, and your pack will forgive you because they can see you're trying." Kael took her hand. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." He led her outside, past the rebuilt stables and the new training grounds, to a hill overlooking the valley.
The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. "When I first came here 10 years ago and found the massacre," Kael said, "I stood on this hill and made a promise that I wouldn't stop until I found whoever was responsible and made them pay, that I'd find the survivor, you, and make sure you got justice. You kept that promise." "I did. But standing here now, watching what you've built," he turned to face her fully, "I want to make a new promise. Not just to seek justice, but to help build something better. A future where packs like yours don't get destroyed in the first place, where wolves like you don't have to hide for 10 years to survive." Leora's throat tightened. "That's a big promise." "I know, but I think together we can do it." Kael pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring, simple silver, etched with the symbols of both their packs intertwined. "Leora Vance, will you be my mate? Not just in bond, but in choice? Will you stand beside me and help me make the Northern Territories better than they've ever been?" Leora stared at the ring, her mind racing. 3 months ago, she'd been a nameless servant scrubbing floors. Now she was an alpha with a pack, standing on her family's land, being asked to become the Alpha King's queen. It should have felt impossible, overwhelming. Instead, it felt right. "Yes," she said, and the word came out steady and sure. "But on one condition." Kael raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "We do this as equals. Not you helping me, not me supporting you, but true partners. Your fights are mine, my fights are yours, and we make decisions together." A slow smile spread across Kael's face. "I wouldn't have it any other way." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the bond between them blazed with joy and completion. Then he kissed her, and it was nothing like the gentle first kiss they'd shared weeks ago. This was fierce and claiming and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, the sun had set completely, and the first stars were appearing overhead. "The council will lose their minds," Leora said, slightly breathless. "The Alpha King marrying a newly restored Alpha whose pack isn't even fully established yet. Let them lose their minds. I've spent 10 years playing politics and making strategic alliances. This isn't strategy, Leora. This is choosing happiness, choosing love, choosing you." Leora leaned into him, watching the stars emerge one by one. "When do we tell them?" "Tomorrow. Tonight, this is just ours." So they stood there on the hill, wrapped in each other's arms, while below them the lights of the Vance estate began to glow, windows filling with warmth and life, and the sound of her new pack settling in for the night. Home, Leora thought. This was home. Not because of the land or the buildings, but because of the people who'd chosen to stand here with her. And tomorrow, she'd begin the work of making sure they never had to run or hide the way she had. The council meeting where Kael announced their engagement was every bit the chaos Leora had predicted. Lords and ladies shouted over each other, some congratulating, others objecting, still others calculating how this new alliance would affect their own political standing. Celine's family, what remained of them after the investigations, sat in stony silence. Leora stood beside Kael's throne, her head high, wearing the colors of her pack for the first time in 10 years. The Vance crest, a silver wolf against a forest green background, had been cleaned and restored, and seeing it displayed proudly instead of hidden made something settle in her chest. "This is unprecedented," one of the older lords was saying. "The Alpha King has always married within the established great houses, not some newly rebuilt." "Careful," Kale's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You're speaking about my mate and a fellow Alpha. I suggest you choose your next words very carefully." The Lord went pale and sat down. Another voice rose. Lord Blackwood, the man who'd known Leora's mother. "If I may, Your Majesty, I think this union is exactly what the Northern Territories need. A reminder that justice and restoration are possible, that the Council serves all packs, not just the powerful ones." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Other voices joined in support. Wolves who'd been at the trial, who'd seen Leora testify and fight and survive. The tide was turning. By the end of the session, the Council had voted to recognize the engagement with only a handful of dissenting voices. Kael had secured agreements for resources to help rebuild not just the Vance Pack, but several other smaller packs that had been neglected or destroyed over the years. It wasn't perfect. Politics never were. But it was progress. That evening, as they walked back to the Vance estate, Kael had been spending more time there than in the capital, helping with the rebuilding. Leora finally let herself believe it was real. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," she admitted, "for this all to be taken away. Nothing's going to take this away. We fought too hard for it." Kael pulled her close as they walked. "Besides, you're forgetting something important." "What's that?" "You're terrifying when someone threatens what you love. I pity anyone stupid enough to try." Leora laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt like freedom. "Is that your diplomatic way of saying I fight dirty?" "It's my honest way of saying you're the strongest wolf I've ever met, and anyone who underestimates you does so at their own peril." They reached the estate to find her pack gathered in the courtyard, not for any formal reason, but just existing together. Children playing, adults sharing meals. The elderly couple she'd taken in teaching some of the younger wolves old songs from their original pack. Community, family, home. "You know what I realized today?" Leora said softly. "What?" "Mordrin thought he won. When he killed my family, when he kept me in his house like a trophy for 10 years, he thought he'd destroyed the Vance Pack completely." She looked at the thriving community around her. But he was wrong. You can't destroy a pack by killing its members. A pack is an idea, a choice to stand together. And as long as even one wolf remembers and refuses to give up. She met Kael's eyes. "The pack survives." "And thrives," Kael added, gesturing to the scene before them. "Look at what you've built in 3 months. Imagine what it'll be like in 3 years. 3 decades. Leora tried to picture it. The Vance Pack growing, thriving, becoming a place of refuge for wolves who needed one. Her children and grandchildren learning the stories of how their family survived and rebuilt. The estate filled with life and laughter instead of ghosts and grief. It was a good vision, a hopeful one. And for the first time since she was 12 years old, Leora let herself believe in hope. 6 months later, on the first anniversary of the day, Leora had thrown wine at the Alpha King. They were married. The ceremony took place at the Vance estate, in the great hall that had been lovingly restored to its former glory. Wolves from across the territories attended, the entire council, representatives from every major pack, and dozens of rogues and scattered wolves who'd heard the story of the servant girl who became a queen. Leora wore a dress of forest green and silver, the Vance colors, with her mother's necklace, recovered from the ruins and carefully restored, around her throat. Kael wore black and silver, the crown's colors, with the Vance crest embroidered over his heart. It was a statement, a joining not just of 2 wolves, but of 2 packs. 2 visions of what the Northern Territories could become. Lord Blackwood performed the ceremony, his voice carrying through the packed hall. "We gather today to witness the joining of Kael Draven, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and Leora Vance, Alpha of the Vance Pack. 2 wolves who found each other in darkness and chose to build something bright. The traditional vows were exchanged, promises to protect, to cherish, to stand together against whatever came. But when it was Leora's turn to speak her personal vows, she set aside the prepared words and spoke from her heart. 10 years ago, I lost everything. My family, my home, my name. I survived by becoming invisible, by making myself small and forgettable. She looked at Kael, her voice strengthening. But you saw me anyway. When I was just a servant throwing wine at a stranger, you looked at me like I mattered, like I was someone worth finding, worth fighting for, worth loving. Her eyes swept the assembled crowd. You taught me that survival isn't enough, that we can take our pain and our losses and turn them into something better, that choosing to stand and fight and build is braver than running or hiding. She turned back to Kael, taking his hands. So I promise you this, I will stand with you, fight with you, build with you. I will be your partner in all things, your equal in authority and responsibility, and I will love you with everything I am for as long as I breathe. Kael's eyes were bright with unshed tears. When he spoke his own vows, his voice was rough with emotion. I spent 10 years searching for you, 10 years following trails and gathering evidence and refusing to give up hope that somewhere, somehow, you'd survived. And when I finally found you, you were more than I ever imagined. He squeezed her hands gently. You were strong where I expected broken, fierce where I expected afraid, and brave in ways that humbled me. He glanced at the crowd, then back to Leora. I promise to never take that strength for granted, to listen when you speak, to follow when you lead, and to stand beside you, never in front, never behind, but beside, as we build the world we both want to see. I will love you, honor you, and choose you every single day for the rest of my life. Lord Blackwood smiled. Then by the authority vested in me by the council and the old laws, I declare you bonded mates. May your union strengthen both your packs and light the way for others. Kael kissed her then, and the hall erupted in celebration, howls and cheers, and the stamping of feet that shook the rafters. The feast that followed lasted until dawn. Wolves from every corner of the territories shared food and stories and songs. Old rivalries were set aside. New friendships were forged. And at the center of it all, Leora and Kael danced to music played by members of her pack, their bond blazing like a beacon. Sometime near midnight, Lord Blackwood pulled Leora aside while Kael was engaged in conversation with other council members. Your mother would be proud, he said quietly. Not just of how you survived, but of who you've become. She always said the Vance Pack would produce a leader who'd change the territories. I think she'd be pleased to know she was right. Leora's throat tightened. Thank you for remembering her, for speaking up when I needed allies. Thank you for giving an old wolf hope again. He smiled. Now go. Enjoy your celebration. You've earned it. Leora rejoined Kael, who immediately pulled her back into the dancing. As they moved together, perfectly in sync, she caught glimpses of her pack around them. The 37 wolves who'd chosen to join her had grown to nearly 60 now, with more arriving every week. Families rebuilding, rogues finding home, scattered wolves discovering they belonged, all of it because she'd chosen to stop running. What are you thinking about? Kael asked, his lips close to her ear. Everything. Nothing. How strange it is that throwing wine at you turned out to be the best accident of my life. Kael laughed, the sound rich and warm. Some would call it fate. Maybe. Or maybe it was just time. Time for hiding to end. Time for justice to catch up. Time for something new to begin. I like that better than fate. It means we chose this. All of it. We did. Leora rested her head against his chest as they swayed, and I'd choose it again, every single time. 5 years later, Leora stood on the same hill where Kael had proposed, watching the Vance estate below. The pack had grown to nearly 200 wolves now, a thriving community spread across the restored lands. The fields were golden with harvest. The buildings were solid and well-maintained. Children played in courtyards that had once been silent and empty. She was pregnant with her second child. Her first, a daughter named Alara after her mother, was 4 years old and already showing the fierce independence that ran in Vance blood. Kael joined her on the hill, Alara riding on his shoulders and chattering about the butterflies she'd found in the garden. Mama, did you see them? There were hundreds. Papa says they come because the flowers are happy. The flowers are very happy, Leora agreed, smiling up at her daughter. Just like us. Kale set Alara down, and she immediately ran off to chase more butterflies, her laughter floating on the wind. Council meeting went well, Capul, Kale said, wrapping an arm around Leora's waist. 3 more packs have requested assistance with rebuilding. Your model is spreading. Our model, Leora corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. We make a good team. The best team. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their daughter play, watching the sun sink toward the mountains, watching the life they'd built thrive around them. Do you ever think about that night? Kael asked quietly. The council gathering where you threw the wine? Sometimes. Usually when I'm trying to explain to Alara why throwing things at people is generally not acceptable, Leora grinned. I have to make exceptions for unless that person is your soulmate and you're establishing dominance. Kael burst out laughing. That is not what you're teaching our daughter. Why not? It worked for me. You're incorrigible. You love me anyway. I really do. Kael pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her swollen belly, where their son, she was certain it was a boy this time, was growing. More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Leora looked at the life spread before her, her pack, her family, her home, everything she'd lost and rebuilt and made new. She thought about the scared 12-year-old who'd hidden in a cellar while her world burned, thought about the nameless servant who'd scrubbed floors and made herself invisible, thought about the woman who'd stood before the council and refused to be silent anymore. All of them were her. All of them had led to this moment. I'm glad I threw that wine at you, she said softly. So am I. Kael kissed the top of her head. Best worst decision you ever made. Second best. The best was choosing to stop running. And look where it got you. Queen of your own pack, mother of future alphas, partner to the most handsome and humble alpha king in the Northern Territories. Leora elbowed him gently. Humble. I said what I said. Alara came running back, her hands full of wildflowers. Mama, Papa, look what I found. Can we put them in this great hall, where the picture of Grandma and Grandpa is? Leora knelt carefully, taking the flowers. The portrait of her parents had been recreated from memory and old sketches, and it hung in a place of honor in the hall. Alara had never met them, would never meet them, but she knew their stories, knew what they'd stood for. I think that's a perfect idea, little wolf. Why don't you run ahead and ask Uncle Tobias to help you find a vase? Alara scampered off, full of 4-year-old energy and purpose. She's going to be formidable, Kael observed. She's going to be free, Leora corrected. She'll never have to hide who she is or make herself small for anyone. Neither will our son. They'll grow up knowing they're loved and safe and powerful. Because of what you built, what you survived. Because of what we all survived, the whole pack. Leora stood, Kael's hand steadying her. That's what Mordrin never understood. He thought he could break us by destroying our bodies. But he couldn't touch what really mattered. And what's that? Leora looked at the estate, at her daughter disappearing through the doors, at the wolves moving through their evening routines below. She felt Kael's solid presence beside her, felt their son moving in her belly, felt the bond connecting her to every member of her pack, humming with life and strength. Hope, she said simply, the stubborn, relentless, absolutely unbreakable belief that tomorrow can be better than today, that we can survive the worst and still build something beautiful. Kael pulled her close, and they stood together watching the sun set on another day in the life they'd chosen. A life built on ashes and pain and the refusal to let darkness win. The girl who'd hidden in cellars was gone. The servant who'd scrubbed floors was gone. In their place stood Alpha Leora Vance Draven, Queen of Wolves, mother and mate and leader. And she was finally, completely, beautifully home. The stars began to emerge overhead one by one, lighting the northern sky. Somewhere in the estate, someone started singing, an old pack song about survival and strength and standing together. Other voices joined in, the melody rising to meet the stars. Leora added her voice to the song, and Kael's deep bass harmonized beside her. The music floated over the valley, over the land her family had died protecting, over the pack she'd rebuilt from nothing. It was a song of remembrance and hope, of endings and beginnings, of girls who stopped running and became queens. And as the last light faded from the sky, Leora smiled. Because this, all of this, was worth every moment of pain it had taken to get here. This was what it meant to truly live,